This podcast contains descriptions of violence against children and adult language and is not suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised. Hi everyone, and welcome to Suffer the Little Children, the true crime podcast giving voices back to the victims of child abuse and shining a harsh spotlight on the parents, guardians, and caretakers who silence them. I'm your host, Lane, and this is episode 149, the Thomas Valva mega episode. In episodes 5 and 6 of this podcast, I told you the story of 8-year-old Thomas Valva. Thomas and his two brothers were unjustly taken from their mother's custody in 2017 and spent the next 3 years living with their father and his girlfriend, both of whom abused, starved, and tortured the boys. On January 17, 2020, Thomas and his 10-year-old brother, Anthony, both of whom were on the autism spectrum, were forced to sleep in the family's unheated garage in their Long Island home. The following morning, Thomas became unresponsive and was later pronounced dead with a core temperature of 76 degrees. Michael Valva and Angela Pollina were arrested and charged with Thomas's murder. In this mega episode, you'll first hear episodes 5 and 6, followed by information I gave in subsequent update episodes. Finally, I will provide all new coverage of the trials of Michael Valva and Angela Pollina, including the horrific details of the way they treated these innocent boys who never should have been ripped from their loving mother's arms in the first place. This is the infuriating story of Thomas Valva. First, I'd like to shout out my newest patrons, Jessica P. from West Warwick, Rhode Island, Jessica S. from Omak, Washington, Rachel C. from Auburn, New York, Bunny M. from Panama City, Florida, and Stephanie C. and Sabrina L. from Behind the Crimson Door. Thank you all so much for your support and helping to keep this podcast going. If anyone would like to help, you can visit patreon.com/stlcpod or ko-fi.com/stlcpod. Thank you all. Thomas's story has stuck with me since I first covered it on the blog in January of 2020. Whether this is your first time hearing this story or you're already familiar, I have no doubt that listening to this episode will fill you with anger. Just a quick note, I don't normally use the names of surviving children in these stories, but at this point, Anthony and Andrew's names are well known amongst those interested in Thomas's story. I have, however, chosen to bleep out the names of Angela's 3 daughters. Finally, episodes 5 and 6 were very early on in my podcasting journey, so I definitely cringed about 1,000 times while listening through them. I apologize in advance for my over-the-top snark and for the fact that my audio editing skills were very undeveloped at the time. First up, you'll hear episode 5 of this podcast, which I originally released in March of 2020. Hi guys, and welcome to Suffer the Little Children, the true crime podcast giving voices back to the victims of child abuse and shining a harsh spotlight on the parents, guardians, and caretakers who silence them. I'm your host, Lane, and this is episode 5, Thomas Valva, part 1. I first blogged about Thomas's story on January 29th, 2020 on sufferthelittlechildrenblog.com, and I've written several update posts about his case since. For those not familiar with this story, Thomas Valva was an 8-year-old boy on the autism spectrum who lived on Long Island with his father, Michael Valva, who was a New York Police Department transit officer, and his father's fiancée, Angela Pollina. Thomas died in January of this year after Michael and Angela allegedly forced him to spend the night in the unheated garage of the family's home on a night when temperatures dropped well below freezing. Since there's so much information out there about this case, including video and audio that I'd like to play for you on the podcast, I'm going to tell Thomas's story over the course of 2 episodes. My sources for today's episode were Newsday, The Washington Post, Live Science, Wikipedia, The Long Island Press, The New York Times, The Daily Beast, Pix11, Facebook, Twitter, NBC New York, CBS New York, and Patch.com. Before I get started, I just want to say that I hope you're all staying safe, healthy, and socially distant during this worldwide coronavirus pandemic we're currently experiencing. My kids and I have been self-quarantined for a week, and I count it as a win that my 12-year-old and my 15-year-old haven't driven each other, or me, completely up a wall by now. My sincerest admiration goes out to parents with younger kids trying to deal with homeschooling and keeping their little ones occupied without really leaving the house. It's hard for the older kids to wrap their heads around social distancing and the concept of being quarantined, but it must be nearly impossible for the younger ones. Just hang in there, everybody. We're going to get through this. On the morning of January 17, 2020, a 911 call from a couple on speakerphone summoned Suffolk County Police to 11 Bittersweet Lane in Center Moriches, New York, which is located on Long Island. This was the home where 40-year-old Michael Valva and his fiancée, 42-year-old Angela Pollina, lived with their blended family of 6 children. When police arrived at approximately 9:40 a.m., they encountered Michael, a New York City police officer, performing CPR on his unresponsive 8-year-old autistic son, Thomas Justin Valva. According to Michael, while waiting for his school bus that morning, Thomas fell in the driveway and lost consciousness. Thomas was rushed to Long Island Community Hospital, where he was pronounced dead. His core temperature at that time was 76 degrees Fahrenheit, or 24.4 degrees Celsius. The average temperature of a live human being is 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, or 37 degrees Celsius. Michael's story of a fall in the driveway quickly fell apart, and investigators determined that as punishment for some real or imagined transgression, Michael and Angela had forced Thomas and his 10-year-old brother Anthony, who was also on the autism spectrum, to spend the night in the unheated garage attached to the family home. Temperatures in Center Moriches had reached an overnight low of 19 degrees Fahrenheit. During an autopsy, the medical examiner ruled Thomas's death a homicide, with a major contributing factor of hypothermia. Before I continue, I just want you to understand exactly what happens to the human body during hypothermia, which occurs when the body temperature falls to about 95 degrees Fahrenheit or lower. Symptoms of mild hypothermia include shivering, weakness, and confusion. The body tries to divert blood flow to the core, which means a loss of feeling in the fingers, toes, nose, and ears. Confusion occurs when blood flow to the brain is reduced. Moderate hypothermia brings drowsiness, uncontrollable shivering, failing motor skills, and deeper confusion. When the condition becomes severe, the person experiences extreme fatigue. Shivering stops and blood flow returns to the extremities as the body all but gives up on keeping the core warm, which can make the hypothermic individual feel as if his skin is on fire. Severe hypothermia leads to inadequate heart function, which in turn leads to reduced blood flow to other organs. This can put the body into a state of shock and can result in multiple organ failure. When the body temperature reaches about 82 degrees Fahrenheit, loss of consciousness can occur, and below 70 degrees, which is considered profound hypothermia, death can occur, usually due to cardiac arrest. Now, just imagine how little Anthony and Thomas felt, banished to the garage with its bare concrete floor for the entire night, as the temperature outside the unheated structure fell to 19 degrees. How much pain and fear did Thomas feel before his confusion became so great that he lost awareness of the gravity of his situation? After digging into this case, I can honestly say that what Michael and Angela are accused of doing to these children is truly one of the worst cases of child abuse I've ever encountered. Michael and Angela told an EMT who responded to their 911 call, who noted that Thomas was cold to the touch, that the boy had hit his head on a door jamb. However, a report to Suffolk County caseworkers from Aaron Lambert, an EMT who responded to the scene, quote, Thomas Valva was observed with visible abrasion to his face, like road rash, which could have resulted by being dragged across pavement. End quote. Erin described her experience at the scene. Quote, "The child was ice cold to the touch. Thomas wasn't wearing underwear or a shirt, and his sweatpants were pulled down to his knees." End quote. Michael told Erin that Thomas hit his head on the doorframe and then wet his pants. He told her he gave Thomas a shower and then put him on the couch in the basement. According to the report, Erin confronted Michael on the spot, telling him that his version of events was inconsistent with the severity of Thomas's injuries. At that point, Michael changed his story, saying that Thomas was heading up the driveway to catch the school bus when he fell face first onto the pavement. Nothing says I'm telling the truth like a story that changes when someone confronts you. Erin's report also stated that Thomas had involuntarily defecated and, quote, had additional abrasions to his knees, elbows, and right flank, end quote. When Angela was questioned by detectives, she gave them the username and password for their extensive video and audio surveillance system, through which the couple monitored all 6 children in their care, which included Michael's 3 sons, 10-year-old Anthony, 8-year-old Thomas, and 6-year-old Andrew, as well as Angela's 3 daughters, 11-year-old twins, and 6-year-old. As police began going through the videos, someone remotely changed the password and deleted some of the videos. What they were able to attain led police to the conclusion that at least some of the children, mainly Thomas and Anthony, were disciplined using some extremely cruel and unusual forms of punishment. On Friday, January 24th, Michael and Angela were each hit with a charge of second-degree murder, which Suffolk County Police Commissioner Geraldine Hart addressed during a press conference on January 24th.
Before we begin, I want to express my sincerest condolences to Thomas Valva's family and friends, especially his siblings. We are here to discuss the arrests of Michael Valva and Angela Pollina for the death of Michael's 8-year-old son, Thomas. The couple has been charged with murder in the second degree because they engaged in conduct which created a grave risk of death to this child. Thomas Valva was subjected to freezing temperatures in the home's unheated garage overnight when the outside temperature was 19 degrees. We first responded to 11 Bittersweet Lane in Center Moriches on January the 17th at 9:40 a.m. after Michael Valva reported that his son Thomas fell in the driveway while waiting for the school bus an hour earlier. Michael indicated that his son lost consciousness after the fall and had remained unconscious. When the officers arrived, Michael Valva was performing CPR on his son in the basement. Thomas was transported to Long Island Community Hospital, where he was pronounced dead. At the time of his arrival at the hospital, Thomas's body temperature was 76 degrees. As with any unattended death, homicide detectives conducted an investigation which revealed inconsistencies in the timing and the nature of the child's injuries as reported by his father. We have determined Thomas was never in the driveway that morning, and he suffered head and facial injuries that were not consistent with the father's account. During the past week, homicide detectives conducted a round-the-clock investigation, which included the review of video and audio recordings captured on the family's home surveillance system, both inside and outside the house. The recordings show the pair was closely monitoring the activities and conversations of their 6 children, Michael's 3 sons, ages 6, 8, and 10, and Angela's daughters, 11-year-old twins, and a 6-year-old. We believe that the 10 and 8-year-old boys were subjected to punishment, including food deprivation and exposure to extremely frigid temperatures. We are still investigating the extent of the abuse and if it extended to all the children. Following Thomas's death, the department notified Suffolk County CPS and assisted in the emergency removal of the other 5 children on January the 17th. The children are currently in a safe environment. These arrests are not the end of the investigation. We are still processing evidence and conducting interviews. This case has hit our department hard, even the most seasoned detectives. I would like to thank our homicide squad for their countless hours in seeking justice for this little boy. I would also like to acknowledge and thank all the agencies that assisted us in this investigation: the New York City Police Department, the East Mauritius School District, the FBI, the Department of Social Services, the Medical Examiner, and the District Attorney's Office.
Prosecutors said that police were able to view surveillance video from prior to Thomas's death, depicting him and Anthony huddled, shivering on the garage floor, with no blankets, pillows, or even a mattress shielding them from the cold concrete. One of the video cameras trained on the garage was labeled "Kids Room," suggesting the garage was considered the boy's bedroom. The 5 surviving children were removed from the home the same day Thomas was pronounced dead, and each placed into the custody of their other biological parent. Suffolk County District Attorney Timothy D. Seeney described Thomas's death as, quote, "one of the worst crimes I've ever seen," end quote, continuing, quote, "the depravity of these defendants is shocking. They caused the death of this little boy, and then they watched him die," end quote. Michael, who has been with the New York Police Department for over 15 years and was most recently assigned to the NYPD's Transit Bureau, has been suspended without pay pending the outcome of the case, according to NYPD Commissioner Dermot Shea, who remarked that the allegations against Michael are disturbing. That's a bit of an understatement, don't you think? Michael and Angela were indicted on January 29th. During the indictment hearing, the district attorney's office detailed horrific abuse that left the boy's mother, Justina Valva, who clutched Thomas's prayer card, in tears. Allegedly, Michael and Angela inflicted upon Thomas and Anthony a great deal of both physical and verbal abuse, including depriving the boys of food, blankets, pillows, and clean clothing. Prosecutors said both boys sometimes showed up at school either soaked in urine or wearing diapers because they were not permitted to use the bathroom at home. They also said Angela texted video clips from the couple's extensive home security network to Michael while he was at work, and that the couple exchanged text messages in which Michael called Thomas a fucking moron and a stupid fucking son of a bitch, when the little boy, his own son, repeatedly fell to the concrete garage floor while experiencing hypothermia. Evil exists, ladies and gentlemen, and I believe Michael Valva and Angela Pollina are 2 of its poster children. District Attorney Carrie Ann Kelly described the ghastly allegations against Michael and Angela at the indictment hearing, quote, "nothing short of cruel, callous, wanton evil. The boys were literally begging for food at school, eating crumbs off the table, eating out of garbage cans, going under bleachers, slapped and punched and carried by the wrist with their feet not touching the floor. Thomas was thrown and dragged down a flight of stairs," end quote. The prosecution alleged that while Thomas's ice-cold, lifeless body lay on the floor in the bathroom, Angela stood nearby fixing her hair in the mirror. Even more chilling was their claim that after Michael was informed in the hospital of Thomas's death, his response was, quote, "I've been through more stressful things than this," end quote. The depth of this couple's psychopathy is unimaginable. I've always wondered how creeps like this manage to find each other. Is there a dating site catering to these people, like onlysociopaths.com or something? At their arraignment hearing, both defendants pled not guilty to the charges against them. Considering the evidence against them includes both audio and video recordings of the 2 of them allegedly abusing the boys, it should be interesting to see how that works out for them. Prosecutors brought up audio recorded the morning of January 17th, prior to the arrival of police on scene. During this recording, a child asks why Thomas can't walk. Angela responds, quote, "because he's hypothermic. When you're washed with cold water and it's freezing, you get hypothermia," end quote. That statement begs the question, did these monsters douse that baby with cold water before banishing him to the garage? Michael adds, quote, "he keeps face planting on the concrete," end quote. Angela replies, quote, "you know why he's falling," end quote. Michael's response is devoid of all empathy for his own son. Quote, "because he's cold. Boo fucking who?" End quote. Angela asks, quote, "what are you doing?" End quote. Michael says, quote, "I'm fucking suffocating him, that's what I'm doing," end quote. Angela snaps at him, quote, "Get your hand off his mouth, there's people everywhere," end quote. Chilling. The prosecution said that the recordings also indicate Michael put Thomas, who was already unconscious, into a hot bath to try to raise his body temperature. Obviously, this was too little, too late. Suffolk County Assistant District Attorney Laura Newcomb said, quote, "They knew he was suffering from hypothermia and they failed to get him any help," end quote. Sini said, quote, "They failed to do anything to help him as he died right in front of their eyes. Not only did they fail to render any type of meaningful aid, they lied to the police officers, they lied to the EMTs," end quote. Court documents refer to an incident that took place 2 years ago. The document reads, "On January 13th, 2018, respondent, Michael, became enraged with Thomas Valva and made the then 6-year-old child lean over a table with his hands stretched out, and respondent repeatedly hit Thomas on the buttocks. This caused the child significant pain and numerous bruises." The document goes on to say that the incident reportedly caused Thomas injury to his lower back that was still causing him pain 3 days later. That's not what I would call a spanking. Michael and Angela are both being held without bail. Thank God. Matt Tuohy, Angela's defense attorney, told the Washington Post, quote, "Right now she is maintaining her innocence. It's going to be a long road. There's a lot of evidence that hasn't been brought out," end quote. So in other words, he's singing the same old tune favored by defense lawyers since the beginning of time. I'll reserve my amazement for the moment he reveals this fabled evidence. Prior to his arrest, Michael had the colossal balls to create a GoFundMe page where he posted, quote, "It is with great sadness that I must bury my 8-year-old son. He passed recently due to a tragic accident. At this time, I am not able to handle these unforeseen costs on my own, and if there is any help anyone can provide, we would greatly appreciate it. In lieu of floral arrangements, we ask that a donation be made instead. Thank you for your help and sympathy," end quote. This piece of shit raked in over $10,000 from more than 200 donors before the results of Thomas's autopsy were revealed. After that report was released, however, the proverbial shit hit the fan. GoFundMe removed the page on January 24th after a massive social media outcry demanding it be taken down. Megan Scripture of GoFundMe Communications made a statement saying, quote, "We removed the campaign and all donors will be refunded in full. The campaign organizer has also been banned from using the GoFundMe platform for any future campaigns," end quote. I don't think that will bother Michael much, though, since it's hard to open a GoFundMe campaign from behind bars. "36-year-old Justina Zubko Valva, who is the estranged wife of Michael Valva and the mother of the 3 boys, has been telling anyone who would listen for years that Michael was abusive to the children. She and Michael were married in 2004. Justina described Michael as unpredictable, with difficulty controlling his anger. Michael filed for divorce in 2015. He was a cop who could afford an attorney. Justina was a Polish immigrant who could not. Michael hated Justina more than he loved his children, and it seemed he would do anything to hurt her. The deck was stacked against Justina, especially when Michael filed false accusations of child abuse against her during the acrimonious divorce proceedings, and near the end of 2017, she lost custody of the boys she loved so much. Prior to Thomas's death, Justina had not seen her children for 2 years. Justina created a Twitter account named Stand Against Child Abuse, which documents the tragic story of a mother trying her damnedest to save her babies from the monster who helped create them. In videos Justina posted on January 7th, 2018, Andrew talks about punishment at his father's house.
I was at Daddy's house.
You weren't. You just had a pee-pee accident.
Yes.
That's not a being bad boy.
But Mommy.
What, baby?
Daddy was rude. Daddy put us at me.
What happened?
And then he didn't want me to have breakfast and anything.
Didn't want you to have breakfast? Andrew, were you hungry?
That's okay, Andrew.
Are you a long time on a timeout? A big brown couch?
Yes. Mommy, I want to go to play basketball.
And then what happened if you want to get out from the couch?
Then Mommy, put your time out again.
Again?
Mommy was before a long time. I time out again too.
How long?
100 days.
100 days?
Yes, and I can't go to sleep. And I can't eat breakfast. And I can't go to you.
He's saying you can't come to me?
Yes.
Why?
I don't know. Daddy said to me that I can't listen to you and can't hug you. And I'm saying I love you, Mommy, and miss you, Mommy.
Why?
I don't know why. I will pick
Why would he say that?
I will. I'm gonna pick the orange one.
Guys.
Mommy,
Yes,
Anthony,
baby.
help me.
It's okay. You just want to play the ball.
Oh, Mommy.
Guys, you know that's not true, right? You always can hug Mommy, kiss Mommy, and tell Mommy what? That you love Mommy and miss Mommy, right?
Right.
Yeah. What's gonna happen if you tell me that you love me and miss me and you give me kiss and a hug? What's gonna happen?
I don't know what's gonna happen. And then Daddy's gonna pull me outside.
Justina tweeted a series of videos on January 8, 2018, captioning the first with, quote, "Father and his girlfriend are brainwashing my special needs children and teaching them hatred towards their mommy. Parental alienation equals children abuse. My children have a right to love their mommy. Taking away that right is a crime," end quote. It's clear from these audio clips that the boys are initially extremely resistant to being coached in this way.
No, Milton. What did you say to me? What did you say? Guys, could you stop while I'm talking? Girls! Thomas, who do you love? No, I can't. I can't. Oh, Mommy.
Tommy, who do you love?
No, I can't. Mommy home.
Andrew, who do you love?
Anthony! Who loves you, Anthony? Anthony! Who loves you?
Who loves you? Who loves you, Anthony? Daddy and...
Daddy. And then Dawn.
Who else?
Whoa. I love Daddy and Angela. Anthony. I love Daddy and Angela. Whoa. I love Daddy and Angela. Thomas, who do you love? Patrick. I love Daddy. I love Mommy. I'm a Jerusalem. I don't love Mommy. Thomas. 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 Thomas, I love Daddy. No, I want Mommy.
I love Daddy.
I want Mommy.
Mommy is mean.
Mommy is mean.
Mommy is mean.
Mommy is mean.
Mommy, get a...
Stop.
Who do you love?
Daddy and Angela.
Who do you want to live with?
Daddy and Angela.
There you go, buddy.
I want to live with Daddy. I want to see Daddy. I want to see Daddy. I will see with Daddy. Mommy, you're not nice. Mommy, you're not nice. Mommy, you're not nice. You are not my nice. I'm not proud of you, Mommy. I love you, Mommy.
I have fun with Daddy and Angela.
I will love you, Daddy and Angela.
Thomas, you want to stay with me? Who do you love?
Daddy and Angela.
Who do you want to stay with?
Daddy and Angela.
Who do you miss?
Daddy and Angela.
Who do you want to live with?
Daddy and Angela.
Mommy is mean.
Daddy is mean.
Mommy hits me.
Mommy hits me.
Mommy don't touch me.
Mommy don't touch me.
I love Angela.
I love Angela.
I love love Daddy.
I love Daddy.
What do you say, Anthony? I love Angela.
I love Angela.
I can't hear you.
What do you say?
I love Angela.
I love Angela.
Louder, Anthony. Anthony, I love Angela.
I love Angela.
I love Daddy.
I love Daddy.
I love you, Anthony. I love you.
Can I have more water? I'm thirsty.
I'll get you some more water. Anthony, do you love me?
Where?
Do you love me?
There.
Louder. Say, I love you.
I love you, Daddy.
Oh, thank you. I love you, Andrew.
So much.
No. When somebody says they
I
love
love you.
you, that's right. Tommy's got it. And Andrew, try again. I love you, Andrew. You say, I love you, Daddy.
I love you, Daddy.
There you go. Tommy, I love you.
I love you.
Thank you.
I want some more water.
I will.
Thirsty.
I know.
I love Angela. Don't touch me. Don't touch me.
On January 9th, 2018, Justina posted a video showing then 4-year-old Andrew explaining that he was not allowed to run from his father and Angela's car to his mother's, and that if he did, he would be punished by being put upstairs and not given anything to eat or drink. The video caption reads, quote, "This video was made after I picked up my children for visitations from their father's house. My son, 4 years, is terrified and talks about being punished by the father and his girlfriend for coming to mommy." End quote.
When Mommy came, did you see Mommy waiting for you? Yes. So what happened?
And run away from the car.
Why? What's gonna happen if you come to Mommy?
Then I'm gonna get in trouble.
What trouble? Punished? How? How you gonna get punished? What she's gonna do? Put you upstairs? What's gonna happen upstairs? I can't hear you. We'll do nothing. And then what's gonna happen? Nothing to eat and drink. She can do that, baby. That's why you were afraid to come to Mommy? Yeah?
Are you going?
It's okay, baby.
On January 10th, 2018, Justina posted a video with the caption, quote, "My children are taught enormous hatred towards me by their father, his girlfriend, and her daughters. #parental alienation." End quote. From what the boys say in the video, it sounds like Angela's then 9-year-old daughters had even jumped on the anti-Justina bandwagon, telling the boys to push her down because they wanted her to be dead. Those girls were clearly brainwashed as well. Let it never be said that and are not victims in his horrible situation too.
Yes. Still wants me to push you down, and I did push you down still.
Who's saying that? I want you to push me down?
Yeah, and I did it. Again.
Yeah.
Again. Mommy, stop. And I did it, Mommy.
Why she wants you to push me down?
Because she wants you to be dead.
She wants me to be dead?
Yeah.
She said that to you?
Yes.
What did she say?
She said, let Mommy be dead.
She told you that she wants me to be dead?
Yeah. Oh no, Mommy! And I don't want you to do. And I don't want you to be like that. Oh no, Mommy!
My God.
Mommy, I didn't push you down, really. Excuse me, Mom. I really didn't push you down, Mommy.
That is not nice what
Mommy,
she's
I
telling
didn't push
you.
you down. Mommy,
I know.
I didn't push you down.
I
Mommy,
know.
Mommy, I didn't push you down.
I know.
From January 18th of the same year, another video shows Michael dropping the boys off to visit Justina and squeezing one of the boys' hands so hard he squeals. Quote, "Cop father forbids the children from coming to their mommy by painfully squeezing their hands and making them cry in order to prove that children do not want to come to their mommy. The father of my kids is a cop who is allowed to abuse his children." End quote.
Hi, Anthony! Hi, Anthony! Go Cookie's house. Go, baby. Hi, buddy! Hi, Andrew! Let him go! Hi, Andrew! Let them go! They can come to me! Let him go! Let him go! He wants to come here, Andrew! Let him go! What are you doing to them? Every single come here, baby. I got you.
I'll be back.
No, he's not crying that he's gonna be back. He's crying because you're shooting them. Okay, I got you. Quickly, let's go. Let's go, Tommy. Let's go.
Reportedly, Justina involved multiple judges, the police, and even tried bringing her son's abuse to the FBI. She warned one judge that if her children remained with their father, they would die. Nothing was done. Records show that between 2015 and 2019, police departments in both Suffolk and Nassau counties received a startling 33 calls to 911, summoning officers to either the former marital home in Valley Stream or the house in Center Moriches where Michael and Angela lived with their blended family of 6 children. Most of these calls were regarding visitation and custody issues. In Suffolk County, Justina claims she was treated by responding officers with hostile attitudes who yelled at her, included false statements in their reports, denied her the ability to file her own written reports, and even threatened her on one occasion. She also claims she was ignored when she tried to make formal complaints in the matter, which she feels was due to Michael's own status as an NYPD officer. Newsday put together a comprehensive timeline of the incidents reported by Justina in which she was intimidated or mistreated, which I will paraphrase for you now. On August 4, 2016, Justina reported to police that Michael had sexually abused 2 of their sons. Nassau Detective Lieutenant Richard LeBrun, the chief spokesman for the police, said their investigation did not find any evidence to support this allegation. According to a letter Justina wrote to U.S. Attorney William Barr requesting help, she waited for a couple of hours for a copy of the police report at the Nassau County Police's 2nd Precinct. When she did receive it, she saw that on the first page the report stated that she was trying to get custody of the boys. She requested that the statement be removed because she had never said that, but officers refused to remove it. On December 17, 2017, Justina called Suffolk County Police at 9:14 a.m. when Michael refused to hand over the kids for their scheduled visitation. Justina claimed the responding officer included false information in the report, so she wrote her account on a separate page. Justina also wrote, quote, "Sergeant David Kopasinski and P.O. Malloy were extremely angry that I wrote my own truthful statements regarding this incident. Sergeant Kopasinski threatened me with calling my job and reporting me to Internal Bureau Affairs, even though he is responsible to write truthful and impartial police report." End quote. On December 31, 2017, Justina again called 911, this time at 9:09 a.m., when Michael refused to hand over the kids. She said the officer who responded refused to take a report. When she was able to pick up her children at 10 a.m., she saw 3 police cars outside Michael and Angela's home and was told that Angela had made a police complaint against her. Later, in a written complaint to Suffolk Police, Justina said, quote, "I cannot count on their help because those members of the service are acting in a partial manner." End quote. On January 2nd of 2018, CPS caseworker Michelle Clark made note in a report that she spoke with Sergeant Kopasinski, who reported that Justina had alleged ongoing abuse by Michael and Angela, even though, according to Sergeant Kopasinski, there was no indication of any kind that there was abuse. He told Ms. Clark that the house was immaculate and that all 6 children appeared healthy and well cared for. When Justina began video recording the situation, he told her that her video could be subpoenaed. On January 15th of 2018, Justina tried to file a report at the 5th Precinct after she came to believe Michael had beaten Thomas. In a later complaint filed with the police, Justina claimed that Officer Lori Ann McManus did not want to hear her story, and then tried to change it to support Michael. Justina claimed that the officer refused to take down the information she provided about Thomas having, quote, "bruises, coagulated blood, black and blues, and dark red spots on his buttocks." End quote. Justina said that Sergeant William Krause weighed in at that point, telling her it was legal for a parent to spank a child, even though she explained that this was far more serious than a spanking. She wrote in the complaint, quote, "Police officers from the 5th Precinct did not want to conduct the investigation pertaining to my allegation against Michael Valva." End quote. On June 20th, 2018, Deputy Inspector John Cahill, executive officer at the 5th Precinct, wrote Justina a letter that exonerated Officer McManus and Sergeant Krause of her allegations, saying they acted in a way that was, quote, "legal, proper, and within department guidelines," end quote. On May 21st, 2019, the NYPD opened its own investigation after Michael filed a complaint against Justina over an alleged incident between them on March 13th in Suffolk County. According to the investigation documents, Justina was never informed what the allegations or the circumstances of the incident actually were, and there is no indication why the NYPD would be investigating an incident out of Suffolk County. The next incident following that one would be the 911 call on January 17th, 2020, leading to Thomas being pronounced dead at the hospital. Suffolk County police officials said in a statement that they were investigating. The written statement read in part, quote, "The death of Thomas Valva is unconscionable, and the Suffolk County Police Department sympathizes with Justina Zubko Valva's loss. The department's Internal Affairs Bureau is currently reviewing all interactions and reports regarding this case. Our officers are trained to investigate each case without bias and on its own merit. Due to the ongoing criminal and internal investigations currently being conducted, it would be inappropriate to comment further." End quote. The school Anthony and Thomas attended, East Moriches Elementary School, where Thomas was a second grader, was also aware of the alleged abuse. Reports from the boys' school psychologist and a special education teacher, which documented their concerns about Michael and Angela's treatment of Thomas and Anthony, can be viewed on Justina's Twitter account, Stand Against Child Abuse. The report from the school psychologist read, quote, "Biggest concern is that Mr. Valva and his fiancée Angela do not understand the depth of Anthony and Thomas's disabilities. Both Anthony and Thomas come into school hungry and frequently say they did not eat breakfast because they did not ask for breakfast or got in trouble. The boys were afraid to go to the nurse's office for a while, and they said it was because they were directed by Mr. Valva and Angela not to go to the nurse's office. This occurred shortly after the school nurse became involved in a CPS case because Thomas had multiple bruises on his bottom from Dad." End quote. The special education teacher's report read, quote, "Anthony and Thomas have stated that they were not allowed to eat breakfast because they did not use their manners, say good morning to Angela, or were doing nothing. They have come in crying because of this." End quote. It goes on, including the following bullet points, among others. I'm reading these verbatim. The boys come in hungry and most days state that they have not eaten breakfast. They usually have a half of a Nutella sandwich, 2 snacks, and a water bottle. I have spoken with Dad that the boys are hungry and need more to eat during the day. I often supply them with cereal bars, chips, fruit, and juice throughout the day. Both boys were coming in with visible dirt on their bodies for days in a row. Anthony has lost 11 pounds in 9 months. Thomas has gained 1 pound in 20 months. Charles Chuck Russo, East Moriches School District Superintendent, said in a statement, quote, "We continue to extend our deepest sympathies to the family and friends of Thomas Valva. Thomas was a tender, loving boy who made tremendous gains during the short time he was a student in East Moriches. While the district legally cannot comment on any specific case, it aggressively reports to the proper authorities child abuse when it is suspected." End quote. And that's where we'll end for today. Join me next week when I will continue my exploration of Thomas's case. Until then, please keep practicing social distancing. The sooner we stop the spread of the coronavirus, the sooner life can get back to normal for all of us. Bye, guys. I'll take a quick sponsor break here, and then you'll hear Episode 6, Thomas Valva, Part 2, which was also originally released in March of 2020. Hi guys, and welcome to Suffer the Little Children, the true crime podcast giving voices back to the victims of child abuse and shining a harsh spotlight on the parents, guardians, and caretakers who silence them. I'm your host, Lane, and this is episode 6, Thomas Valva, part 2. If you haven't yet listened to part 1, you'll definitely want to go back and listen to last week's episode before you proceed with this one. Just to recap, Thomas Valva was an 8-year-old boy on the autism spectrum who lived on Long Island with his father, Michael, an NYPD officer, and his father's fiancée, Angela Pollina. Thomas died in January of this year after Michael and Angela allegedly forced him to spend the night in the unheated garage of the family's home on a night when temperatures dropped well below freezing. As we heard in the last episode, Thomas had reportedly endured years of abuse at the hands of his father and his wicked, almost stepmother. My sources for today's episode were the same as last week: Newsday, The Washington Post, Live Science, Wikipedia, The Long Island Press, The New York Times, The Daily Beast, Pix11, Facebook, Twitter, NBC New York, CBS New York, and Patch.com. Once again, I hope you're all staying healthy, safe, and away from other people as we continue to weather this worldwide pandemic. Make sure you wash your hands properly after making a grocery trip, accepting a delivery, even opening a pizza box. Also, if you suffer from anxiety, depression, or any other kind of mood disorder, please make sure you're not neglecting your mental wellness. Therapists and psychiatrists are offering virtual sessions. Don't forget to take any medications prescribed to you, order your refills on time, nurture yourself, and if you find yourself getting frustrated, especially with a child or another vulnerable person you happen to be quarantined with, please walk away. Take a break. Call someone. Find coping skills that help you manage anger, frustration, sadness, or any other negative emotion you might be feeling. I've read reports from hospitals in some areas of severe child abuse cases increasing as a result of this pandemic as parents deal with unprecedented pressure from finances, being stuck in the house with their kids, and any number of other stressors. Be kind to yourself. Open your blinds when it's sunny outside. Open your windows when the weather's nice. Spend some time on your deck or patio if you have one. Take your dog or your kids for a walk. Just stay 6 feet away from other people. And hey, while I'm at it, take your vitamins too. Stay well, everyone. Now let's jump into this week's episode by talking a little bit more about Children's Protective Services involvement with the Valva family. In 2018, allegations of child neglect against Michael and Angela triggered a year-long child supervision program. According to Suffolk County Department of Social Services Commissioner Francis Pierre, quote, orders of protection for the parents to refrain from harmful behaviors towards the children and mandated participation in a positive parenting program had been put in place, end quote. So basically, Michael and Angela were legally prohibited from hitting their children, which, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't that a law already? After the expiration of the supervision program, Pierre said that the agency investigated additional complaints related to Michael and Angela in 2019. As it turns out, on February 27, 2019, the New York State Office of Children and Family Services received an anonymous tip, detailed in a report later sent to Justina Zubko Valva, Thomas's mother, that stated, quote, for the past week, Anthony, 9, has been coming to school with his clothes and backpack soaked in urine. Stepmother, Angela, and father, Michael, are aware that the child is arriving at school soiled and failed to adequately address the concern. The child's feet and hands are bright red, end quote. Along with this report, Justina also received a letter saying, quote, the investigating district/agency has determined the report to be unfounded, end quote. Suffolk County launched an internal investigation of the Department of Social Services departmental procedures and actions in regard to Thomas's case after his death. Suffolk County Executive Steve Bellone said, quote, as a parent, I am horrified by what happened to this beautiful boy. As county executive, I want to know if there's anything else that could have been done under existing law to prevent this from happening. Beyond that, I want to know if anything in this case suggests that changes should be made to existing policy or law, end quote. In addition, a task force would be established, according to Bellone, quote, to review all Child Protective Services policies and procedures as they relate to children with autism and other developmental disabilities. The task force will be charged with reviewing procedures for how services are provided to children with autism and other special challenges under current law, determine if the current system leaves children with disabilities more vulnerable, and whether additional safeguards need to be enacted." End quote. Thomas's mother, Justina, who works as a corrections officer on Rikers Island, told the New York Post, quote, "There are so many people responsible for this tragedy. The institutions that are supposed to protect the children protect the abusers." End quote. Unfortunately, after covering as many stories as I have to agree with her. The police worked with the school district, social services agencies, and the FBI to put together the full picture of the past several years in Thomas's life. Justina said that Thomas, quote, "had such an amazing, good heart. Everybody who knew him, they instantly fell in love with him. He was just a joy of everybody's life." End quote. She told another news station, quote, "Thomas was this little 8-year-old boy, my baby, who was always joyful, always stands for the truth, play his cars, read books, loved songs." End quote. On Sunday, January 26th, friends, family members, first responders, and strangers alike paid tribute to Thomas at a candlelight vigil at Kaler's Pond in Center Moriches. Justina attended with her surviving boys, 10-year-old Anthony and 6-year-old Andrew. All three spoke in remembrance of Thomas.
Dear friends, just want to express big gratitude to all of you for showing up tonight to honor my little angel Thomas, to be here to support cause that is so precious to my heart, to honor his life, and just I'm so grateful for outpouring amount of support, and words can describe that it touched my heart, because I know I'm not alone in this. Tonight is all about Tommy, my little baby who just loved everybody who encounter with him, experience love just pouring from his precious heart. Tommy was always a boy who stood for the truth, and unfortunately that's why he lost his life. But his legacy is not gonna stop. I am pledging to continue fighting for all those victims of this abusive system that I got involved with through court proceedings, and the abuse that little children encounter is enormous. There's more victims out there. My heart goes out to you, to your families, to the little innocent babies that cannot speak for themselves. Just please continue pray for my family. I want to thank you, all my family, my friends, my co-workers, everyone who keeps us in your prayer, everybody who reach out, and most of all I want to thank God Almighty, because for God nothing is impossible. And just because the case of my son obviously went public, it's all because of God's grace. And Blessed Mary, I know you were my son's mommy for the past 2 years, where I wasn't able to be there for him. Please keep him close to your heart. May my little angel rest in peace. I love you, Tommy. And till we meet again in heaven. Amen.
Andrew piped up and said, "God bless Tommy." His older brother Anthony said, "We love you all. Thank you for coming. After the vigil, Justina, her mom, and the boys visited the Center Moriches firehouse, where Anthony and Andrew were allowed to play on the fire trucks and hang out with the firefighters and EMTs present. As I mentioned in last week's episode, Justina was granted temporary emergency custody of Anthony and Andrew after Thomas's death. Gary Rosenthal, an assistant county attorney for CPS, testified on Justina's behalf at the emergency family court hearing, saying that past allegations Michael made against her had been dismissed and that she was found to be credible. Suffolk County Court Judge Frank Tantone said to Justina during the hearing that therapy would be critical for the boys due to the loss of their brother. Justina told Newsday, quote, "It shouldn't get to the point that a child has to die for the justice to be served. So I am heartbroken that I'm only picking up my 2 children instead of 3 of them. But I'm so thankful that they're going to be safe tonight. I'm so thankful." End quote. Justina added that 10-year-old Anthony also suffered the effects of spending that sub-zero night in the garage, telling reporters that he had frostbite on his hands and his legs. Gino Calli, who is the biological father of Angela's 6-year-old daughter, attended the family court session on Monday, January 27th as well, telling reporters that he knew something like this would happen.
I would watch Angela physically abuse her twin girls before the boys were involved, before my daughter was even born. She would beat one of the girls. I would break it up. Then get threatened that she was going to call police.
At the hearing, Gino was awarded custody of.
I've always wanted to be in my daughter's life. There's not been one day I haven't wanted to be in my daughter's life.
And Angela prevented that?
Always.
Michael Ichcan, the father of Angela's 11-year-old twin daughters, now has custody of and Michael said on Facebook, quote, "As you're all aware, I was awarded full custody of my girls on Monday after being in court for close to 12 hours. Best part of the day is, after 8 years, I finally, for the first time, tucked them in and kissed them goodnight, which was priceless." End quote. Neither man had seen the girls in 3 years. Speech pathologist Kim Taylor, who worked with Thomas when he spoke his first words at almost 3 years old, gave several news outlets interviews about the little boy she remembered well. Quote, "We were really thrilled with his progress. The smiles, he was so happy, he really was." End quote. Kim remembers Justina as a steadfastly adoring presence in Thomas's life, crediting the boy's mother for his progress. Quote, "He was really, really loved. She was an amazing mother, she really was. Just completely involved in their lives, making sure they got the time they needed." End quote. Kim came to the family's home twice a week as part of New York State's Early Intervention Program, or EIP, to help Thomas with his speech and language disabilities. At the time, Justina also had newborn Andrew to care for, as well as then 4-year-old Anthony, who had his own disabilities. Quote, "She was overwhelmed, but she was always trying to make sure he, Thomas, got everything he needed. His mom sat with me the entire session asking questions."
Thomas was a very sweet, quiet, smart little boy. He already, his brightness was shining through even at that age. I remember Thomas loved when his mom would hug him, and he loved when I was hands-on with him, or I would hug him, or tickle him. He loved that. His first words were ball and go. So it was very exciting for us. The mother was overjoyed, and so was I, to hear his first words.
Michael, Kim said, was present on a few occasions, but he stayed in another part of the house during her visits. Quote, "I didn't have a lot of interaction with the dad. My feeling about him is that he was not really involved. He was doing his own thing." End quote. The family's Civil Liberties Union New York is demanding the 3 judges be held accountable who, over time, had the opportunity to prevent Thomas's murder, but continue to rule in Michael Valva's favor instead of giving the 3 boys to their loving mother. The judges in question are Hope Schwartz Zimmerman and Joseph H. Lawrence of Nassau County and Bernard Chang of Suffolk County. In a Facebook post, the organization said, quote, "New York Family Court is complicit in the murder of yet another child. In February 2019, notorious Long Island judge Hope Schwartz Zimmerman and/or her partner judges Bernard Chang and Joseph H. Lawrence received evidence via the New York Office of Children and Family Services that a 7-year-old child, Thomas Valva, was being abused. That alleged abuse included complaints that the child was being forced to sleep in an unheated garage by Michael Valva, an NYPD police officer. Judges Zimmerman and/or Chang and/or Lawrence ignored the complaints and granted the cop custody of the children. After describing Thomas's murder, the paragraph continued by quoting Justina, who said, quote, "I am the mother of 3 little children. 2 of the oldest have special needs, who were brutally, immediately, and without any reason, taken away from me by Judge Zimmerman, who completely took away my right to defend myself and my children because I could not afford to hire a lawyer." End quote. Angela's twins are now in the custody of their biological father, Michael Ichkan, and his wife, Lauren, who have 2 young sons together. A friend has set up a GoFundMe to help the girls settle into their new life. They had none of their clothing or possessions immediately after the tragedy. The family will need to move out of their 2-bedroom basement apartment as well, which is insufficient for the couple and now 4 children, and into something more feasible for a family of 6 in order to maintain custody of the girls. Visitation was held on January 29th at the Mangano Family Funeral Home in Deer Park, New York. Huge, enormous appreciation to Sal Mangano and the Mangano Funeral Homes for donating Thomas's funeral services to the family.
Tommy is watching over all of us. He's angel in heaven. Thank you for your kindness. Thank you for your heart. And God bless you all.
Over 150 mourners, including family members, friends, strangers, and public figures such as Suffolk County Executive Steve Ballone, gathered on January 30th, 2020 for the funeral mass at St. Elizabeth of Hungary Roman Catholic Church in Melville, New York, to say goodbye to the little boy whose mother called him Tommy, followed by his burial at St. Charles Cemetery in East Farmingdale. Before the service began, Justina, Anthony, and Andrew leaned down to kiss the small, gold-trimmed white casket. During a poignant homily given by Bishop Andrzej Jaslewski, the auxiliary bishop for the Diocese of Rockville Center, who baptized Thomas as a baby, the community heard what a special little guy he was. The bishop described Thomas as, quote, like every child, full of life, running, making noise, even during the Mass, even in the church. Thomas was just a little boy. He just wanted to be loved, wanted to be hugged, wanted to be cherished. He wanted to be wanted. He was a gift. End quote. The homily continued, quote, Thomas, little boy, thank you for the gift of you. Thank you for the gift of life. Our legal and social system failed him. I am sorry to say that somehow we failed him. Do you know why? Because we create systems. We make our agencies that are supposed to take care of life, take care of children. What happened? What went wrong? I hope the message of this tragedy will teach so many hearts and so many minds, just simply because we have to do something about this. How long and how many lives will it take for us to learn? End quote.
I hope that the message of this tragedy will teach so many hearts and so many lives, just simply because we have to do something about this. You know, another beautiful life was lost because of our human negligence. I feel that we failed this little boy. System fell, or we as religious or social leaders, we failed him because we are the ones who are supposed to make change. We are the ones who are supposed to protect life.
Justina read from the book of Revelation during the service, and 10-year-old Anthony even read from the Bible. As pallbearers loaded Thomas's casket into a hearse, Andrew, safe in his mother's arms, gave a little wave as if to say goodbye to his older brother. Justina spoke with reporters after the defendant's arraignment on February 6th.
I just want to say it was so extremely difficult to, sit in a courtroom, listen to obviously all the facts related to my son Thomas's death. I just kept thinking about how much abuse all my children encounter from the hands of those 2 abusers, Michael and Angela, for years, day after day, being deprived from food, shelter, the basics, what every child should be provided with. I kept thinking about all the institutions who failed to help him, who completely did absolutely nothing. Now everybody's trying to do the right thing, but where were you when I begged you for help? When you could have saved my child's life? I did file a complaint with Suffolk County District Attorney's Office. I did file a complaint with Nassau County District Attorney's Office, FBI, Suffolk County Police, Nassau County Police, Attorney General. Nobody helped my children. There should be first-degree murder. I don't understand that there's a second-degree murder. They kept telling me that that's the highest they can go. No, you can go higher. You have to set up the standards. That case like that, all the children out there who are in similar situation, who are similarly abused, are gonna know that crime like that is punishable to the highest extent of the law, not to the second extent of the law. Thomas deserves much more than that. The justice needs to be served. Why all the people involved who knew about this enormous abuse, why they not in jail by now? Why they not being criminally charged? Dana McCabe, attorney for the children. Ethan Hartner, attorney for the children, knew about the abuse. Ethan Hartner is still on the case. Dana McCabe is still on the case. They still keep their jobs. What about the CPS case workers? Michelle Clark, Jennifer Lance, Melissa Estrada, Jean Manteau. Everybody involved from Suffolk County, Child Protective Services, all the caseworkers who were involved, they still keep their jobs. They're not criminally charged. I don't understand that. And we're all paying money from our taxes, and they conduct all those criminal actions against the children. They all involved in murdering my child. All the judges, Judge Zimmerman, Lawrence, Bernard Cheng, they all should be in jail because you are a judge or you have a high power position. It doesn't mean you are above the law. My son stands. What happened to my son is a clear evidence of enormous corruption that's happening in the system. We're talking about a web of corruption between police, DA's office, CPS, attorneys for the children, all those institutions. People involved have Thomas's blood on their hands. They are people involved in my child's death that are walking free. And they should be in jail. And they should not harm any other child. I stand here for Tommy because he deserves justice. And I hope that is gonna bring change. I hope there's gonna be either institution external to oversee all the actions that all those institutions are conducting, especially if it comes to the children. And I pray to God that changes are gonna happen soon, because the children, you see, this case is public, but there are kids out there that are dying every day and nobody knows about it. So pray to God that this is gonna bring changes very soon, because this corruption cannot continue any longer. We need to stay strong and oppose what happened to me, to my children, because as you know, the effects of this abuse are gonna stay with them for the rest of their lives, and nobody's gonna bring the time that I lost with my children. Nobody is gonna bring the time that they lost just to feel safe and happy. So, thank you for all the support and love that everybody keeps expressing towards me and my family. Let's let the changes happen. Let's have people in all those offices and institutions who truly care about the children, who are stand for the truth, who oppose the corruption, who fight for children's lives. Thank you again. And please pray for my family. Thank you.
CPS attorney Gary Rosenthal said in court on February 10th that caseworkers had visited the boys twice in the previous 10 days at Justina's home in Valley Stream and found an abundance of food and 2 happy boys. He told a family court judge at the hearing, quote, "The boys are doing fantastic under the circumstances with Mom," end quote. Over a dozen of Justina's supporters were in the gallery. Many wore pins with Thomas's photo and blue ribbons, which symbolized child abuse prevention. The hearing on February 10th was requested by CPS and was intended to clarify how often caseworkers should visit Anthony and Andrew, which Justina described as an act of retaliation against her because she blames the agency for Thomas's death, saying prior allegations of abuse against Anthony and Thomas were not properly investigated. Justina told the judge, quote, "CPS is just looking for another way to have supervision over my kids, to try to falsely accuse me," end quote. She told the judge that the children are improving and said that Anthony has gained 6 pounds since they began living with her and that he and Andrew had returned to school. A court-appointed attorney for the boys named Ethan Halpern backed Justina up, telling the judge that the boys are doing well and that Justina had been very cooperative. Justina's supporters in the courtroom applauded when Judge Frank Tantone ruled that there was no reason to increase CPS oversight of the family. Finally, a judge in this case who recognizes a good parent when he sees one. Justina appeared in court again on Thursday, February 13th, this time staring down the 2 people who allegedly murdered her son. The accused murderers appeared before a family court judge on allegations they abused the other 5 children who lived in the home. Lawyers for CPS testified about how well Angela's 3 daughters were doing in the custody of their biological fathers. The 3 girls have also returned to school. Angela did not ask for visitation with the girls during the court hearing. On Saturday, February 15th, a group amassed outside the Suffolk County Department of Social Services in Riverhead, New York, chanting "Justice for Thomas" and carrying signs with various related messages, including "Protect our children from abuse, not the abusers." Justina was among the group, along with the organizer of the rally, Dina Marie Morazzo of the Take Action, Justice for Thomas Facebook group, and Marie Goldsberry, the organizer of a GoFundMe campaign benefiting Justina. Dina said, quote, "We are rallying to change a broken system at CPS. Justina is here, and we are here to support her. We are not going to let this be swept under the table. We are not going to stop until the system is fixed," end quote. Another attendee was Kathleen Berezny, a former longtime Riverhead Board of Education member and president, who said, quote, "I just want this corruption of agencies to be investigated and this not to happen to families and children. It is horrific what Thomas went through," end quote. At the rally, Justina spoke exclusively with Patch.com. She said, quote, "We definitely want to raise our voices in stopping the corruption, to move forward as well to make the changes necessary to make sure that other children who are victims of this system are going to receive justice, are going to be safe, are not going to be abused anymore. This cause truly touches my heart because the death of my son Tommy could have been preventable. There were alarms on my behalf as well as the school that could have saved his life. So this is for you, Tommy," end quote. Justina posted a video to YouTube entitled, "In Honor of My Little Angel Thomas." The description below the video reads, quote, "It broke our hearts to lose you, but you did not go alone. A part of us went with you the day God took you home. If tears could build a stairway and heartaches make a lane, we'd walk our way to heaven and bring you back again. In life we loved you dearly, in death we love you still. In our hearts you hold a place no one could ever fill. Rest peacefully in heaven, our sweet little angel. We love you so much and miss you," end quote.
Do you want to listen to a song?
Yes. What is it about?
It's about... I forgot to do the mic volume, echo. Oh, not do the echo. and the echo.
Okay.
I'll do the volume.
Okay.
Loud.
Nice. What is your song about?
It's a song about One Direction.
Okay. What is it about?
It's about that you dance about a One Direction. And you need to play rock guitar.
Okay.
Okay, so for now it's a flower guitar.
Okay.
I need to change it into flowers into hot flowers.
Okay, so let me hear it.
Just use the words. I want to tell you don't know. You don't know they're beautiful. That's what makes you beautiful.
I get tears in my eyes every time I watch that video. Hearing Thomas's little voice in a duet with his mommy just tears my heart open. Another video she posted shows Thomas drawing a picture for his mom and the boys enjoying Kinder Surprise eggs while interacting with Justina.
Paper.
It's a nice piece of paper.
Yes.
What are you gonna draw?
A heart.
A heart? What heart? What kind of heart?
M and a V.
Nice.
That's how you make a heart.
Okay. And who's gonna be for?
I am. Mommy, help me.
Yes.
Help me, please.
What? Well, what color is the heart?
Red.
Nice. Let me see.
I'm gonna draw 10 hearts.
Okay. Nice. Yes, baby. Yes. Yes. Bring one for Tammy. Tammy, go get your Kinder Egg.
Okay, Mommy.
Okay.
Ow!
Uh-oh. You okay? You stepped on a... Antoś, go get your Kinder Egg. Shake it. Shake it. Nice. Oh, those are regular Kinder Eggs. Those are not Kinder Joy. Are they Kinder Joy? Or regular? No Kinder Joy? Those are regular Kinder Surprise. What's inside?
I don't know. We'll probably figure it out.
If you see what kind of toy... You eating your chocolate? Is it yummy or yucky?
Yummy.
Yummy?
Yummy.
Oh.
6,
Thank you. Good stuff. Thank you for sharing.
9.
You eat it. You know why? Because I bought it just for you. And you, mister.
This 10 hearts is for you.
Oh.
And don't forget to draw the flower.
Thank you, sweetie pie. Oh, Mommy's so happy. All 10 hearts for Mommy.
And a flower for you.
Oh, and a flower. Oh.
I always love you.
Oh, I love you too, guys. I love you so much. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. Oh,
and a heart is for you.
Oh my God, come here. Give me a big kiss on the whole. Big.
Biggest hug.
Yes, baby. I got. You got a crocodile? What crocodile?
We're allowed to open this
baby. It's for you. It's for you.
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
Hey, Mommy.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I'm wondering what's inside.
I wish I need some help.
What's inside those toys? Just crack it. Press it. Oh, it's cracking. Push it. Push it.
I'll crack it.
Wait, I'm gonna crack it more. Here we go. Yay! We cracked the egg.
Look what I got, Mommy.
What is it, baby? It looks like a little monkey.
I'm gonna eat the chocolates and let's see if it's so yummy. Look at the camera.
Whoops! The chocolate is falling on the floor. Yummy?
It's so good. It's not wrong. It's right. It's not yucky. It's yummy.
In court on February 24th, Michael Valva, whose original attorney withdrew from the case due to a possible conflict of interest, claimed destitution, saying he could neither find nor afford a new attorney. During the hearing, Michael wore the same black V-neck t-shirt and blue jeans he wore when he was arrested in an obvious ploy to gain sympathy. The judge told him, quote, "Any idea that you would represent yourself would be a fool's errand," end quote. Michael's response was, quote, "I just don't have the funds and I have no idea how to represent myself," end quote. Justina, who was over 4 years into a highly acrimonious divorce from Michael, disagrees, saying, quote, "Constant excuses that he doesn't have money, he does have the funds," end quote. Justina's allegations that Michael is hiding money are not entirely unfounded. Justina has brought to light copies of Michael's Chase Bank records, which she received during her divorce and family court cases. The bank records reveal several large deposits from unknown sources being made into Michael's accounts as far back as 2017. Some of these deposits were made at ATMs. These deposits are highly concerning because they can't be explained away as income from Michael's job as a transit cop. Justina has said that she fears the boys were being sexually abused.
My children were sexually abused. They're produced for childhood pornography. Why nobody is talking about it? There is so much evidence in this case. The father receiving thousands and thousands of dollars a month, 30 to 130,000 a month in deposits from unknown sources. Children's testimony. I already expressed the allegation of sexual abuse in 2016. I filed police reports. The specimen wasn't even tested, wasn't even sent to the lab because I was told by Detective Salazar that it was too expensive to test it.
Michael reportedly received a letter from the city of New York declaring him AWOL from his employment as transit officer, which, according to his former attorney, means he is virtually penniless. This made him eligible for a court-appointed lawyer, which outraged Justina.
Court-appointed private attorney that obviously, as the taxpayers, we all pay for the attorney appointed to the murder of my son, and that's not acceptable.
At another court hearing on February 27th, Justina laid the verbal smackdown on Donna McCabe, the boys' former court-appointed attorney, who stepped down from her role in the divorce case on that date. For years, Ms. McCabe vouched for Michael Valva and Angela Pollina, insisting to the court that all 3 of Justina's sons had a wonderful home life with their father. She even gave various judges her opinion that Michael should retain custody of the 3 boys, who were removed from their mother's custody in September of 2017 due to unsubstantiated abuse allegations he leveled against Justina. The whole time, Ms. McCabe advocated for Michael to have full custody of the boys, which was not her job, for the record. Her job was to advocate for those boys, not for their father. But the whole time, red flags were popping up left and right that Ms. McCabe flat out ignored. Justina reported abuse multiple times, and even the boys' school repeatedly called the child abuse hotline to report that Anthony and Thomas frequently came to school in diapers or urine-soaked clothing, were always hungry, and even scrounged through the garbage for scraps. They were losing weight, and they had visible injuries from abuse. End quote. I certainly hope Donna McCabe heard the biting comments Justina gave about her outside that court hearing, and that those words cut deep, because as far as I'm concerned, Ms. McCabe has a special place in hell waiting for her. Justina said, quote, "Obviously she knows that the public are seeing her criminal actions, seeing what she's done. Her criminal actions caused the death of my son Tommy, and unfortunately, she's going to have to respond in front of God for what she's done. I actually petitioned to move the court in at least 3 different motions to remove her immediately for the damage she has done for all those years toward me and my children for hiding their severe abuse. Unfortunately, she was too protected. The corruption was too enormous for any judge to just let her off the case." End quote. On Sunday, March 1st, hundreds of blue-clad supporters gathered at A.J. Hendrickson Park in Valley Stream, New York, for the Justice for Thomas walk. Many of the attendees wore T-shirts or carried signs demanding justice in Thomas's case. Some brought toys and gifts for Anthony and Andrew. Valley Stream Mayor Edwin Fair presented Justina and the boys with a giant golden ticket to participate in the town's summer recreation program. Justina told reporters during the gathering that the location was Thomas's favorite park. She said, quote, "We used to come here every day in the summertime. This park was absolutely a beautiful place for them to run, ride their scooters, their bicycles. Tommy loved to play outside," end quote. At the gathering, a plaque was dedicated in Thomas's memory beneath a weeping cherry tree, where Justina said, quote, "It's in the best spot, overlooking the pond. Tommy used to love watching the water, going to the beach, the lake, the pond," end quote. She told the attendees that she could tell Thomas was with them at the gathering because the sun was shining so brightly. While attendees placed white carnations beneath Thomas's tree, his 10-year-old brother Anthony read from the plaque, which says, "The loss is immeasurable." Justina took a moment to address her supporters in the crowd.
This whole journey, it wouldn't be possible without your love and support. You are my angels who made this healing process to be possible. And I pray to God every day for you guys. For you who truly touched my heart, my children's hearts. And God bless all of you. Thank you once again.
On March 4th, Suffolk County Executive Steve Bellone unveiled the results of a pair of month-long reviews, internal and external, of CPS's handling of Thomas's case, as well as 6 proposed laws to prevent such a tragedy from happening in the future. The task force he established to conduct the external review essentially found that CPS failed Thomas and overlooked glaring indicators of abuse in the Valva home.
As the father of a 7-year-old boy, I cannot fathom how a father could leave his son in a freezing garage while sleeping in a warm bed nearby. Beyond this obvious evil, though, we were also forced to confront the failings of a system that placed Thomas and his brothers in the custody of this man, of a system that did not hear the pleas of people trying to protect Thomas. No one more so than his mother, Justina. Today we are announcing fundamental changes to that system, changes that are designed to prevent a tragedy like this from ever happening again. Today we are announcing legislation based on the recommendations from the Suffolk County External Task Force to Protect Children that will transform the operations of CPS, particularly when it comes to protecting children on the autism spectrum. Children like Thomas Valva. First, we are proposing to create a new specialized team within the Department of Social Services that will handle all cases involving kids on the autism spectrum or with other developmental disabilities. The second bill will mandate training for autism and other special needs cases. The bill will also require increased investigator training for all CPS caseworkers. The third bill will mandate increased scrutiny for cases reported by certain school officials. The fourth bill will establish criminal penalties for knowingly recording CPS interviews with children without the consent of the investigator. The fifth bill will establish caseload standards for Suffolk County CPS caseworkers. And the sixth and final bill, we will publish caseloads and staffing levels on the county website. These 6 bills, collectively called the CPS Transformation Act, will fundamentally change the way that CPS does business. While there's nothing that we can do to bring Thomas back, we can move forward with these transformational changes so that we can do everything we can to prevent tragedies like this from happening in the future.
Critics of the proposed laws suggest these measures are nowhere near enough, and in a statement, Justina herself called the changes unacceptable. Quote, "This law is outrageous, not acceptable, and allows for the corruption to increase in measure, and the victims of this abusive system to be more victimized and harmed, as I and my children were for years, that led to my son Thomas's brutal murder by Michael Valva and Angela Pollina, who were assured that their criminal and abusive actions will always be justified by the corruptive system and individuals involved in this case. The corruption is not going to stop if the individuals who were involved in purposely hiding the severe abuse of my children and me are not going to be held accountable for their criminal actions to the highest extent of the law. The corruption is not going to stop if this system is not going to be fixed immediately. The CPS caseworkers, attorneys for the children, forensic evaluators have to wear body cameras during all their interactions with the children and parties involved. The court proceedings should be video recorded to avoid manipulation with the court transcripts and fight the corruption in the justice system. Those are the basic steps that will initiate the fight against this enormous corruption and will protect the children and all the innocent people involved." End quote. A prominent criminal defense attorney, John Laturco, has been appointed to represent Michael Valva and will be paid $75 an hour to represent the accused murderer, which several other lawyers refused to do. For his part, Laturco fits the part of the slimy, smarmy defense attorney to a T. He even provided Michael with a suit and collared shirt from his own home to wear to court. Reading from a written statement, Laturco told reporters, quote, "Michael Valva is emotionally distraught over the death of his son Thomas Valva. However, we contend that Thomas's death was a nightmarish accidental death and clearly not a murder. Michael Valva is now being portrayed as a monster when in actuality he's a caring father of 3 boys and his fiance's 3 daughters." End quote.
The facts will come out and will show that this was an accidental death.
No word on whether any of the reporters hearing this nonsense were injured by the violent and involuntary rolling of their eyes in response. In fact, while Laturco read his statement, bystanders heckled him loudly. I shouldn't be as satisfied by that as I am. Laturco says Michael is on suicide watch, confined to his cell 23 hours a day and under constant monitoring in jail. Oh, listen, it's the world's smallest violin. Laturco, who will be assisted with the case by defense attorney Anthony LaPinta, believes the jury pool has been tainted by the high-profile nature of the case and hopes to obtain a change of venue. Quote, "The media, his estranged wife, and the Suffolk County District Attorney has vilified him and sensationalized this story, whereby it is almost impossible to obtain a fair trial in this jurisdiction on his behalf. Nonetheless, we vow to provide him with the most zealous representation possible." End quote. He also claimed that the garage where Thomas and Anthony were isolated was unlocked, and that a large electric space heater was plugged in, providing them with heat.
The space heater was turned on that night, and we will have the space heater examined.
Grasping at straws much, buddy? As for why the boys were sleeping in the garage in the first place, Laturco squirmed his way out of answering that one by saying, quote, "This case has psychological complexities that we will discuss at a later time," end quote. He added that Michael will undergo a forensic examination. Of course he will. As for Angela's attorney, Matthew Tuohy, he's trying to dump all of the blame for Thomas's death on Michael, saying Angela was, quote, "warned not to interfere with him and the household situation," end quote, and that she had to navigate around Michael's emotions, temper, and behavior. I honestly can't imagine how these 2 shitty human impersonators could possibly think they'll get away with what they've done, allegedly, especially considering some of the evidence prosecutors have against them. From video of Thomas shivering on the bare concrete in the garage, to text messages calling Thomas a piece of shit, that one from his own father, and discussing starving the boy, beating him, and denying him bathroom access, not to mention the audio recording police found from the morning of Thomas's death, when Michael mocked Thomas for being hypothermic. Remember, boo fucking who? And flat out told Angela he was trying to suffocate the kid. I think it would take a literal miracle to convince anyone that the demonic duo were anything but guilty of Thomas's murder. I guess that remains to be seen. Of course, they're innocent until proven guilty. Suffolk County District Attorney Timothy Sini released a statement on Monday, March 9th, announcing his intention to impanel a special grand jury to investigate Thomas's death. Cini's statement added that after Thomas's death, he assembled a team of, quote, expert prosecutors in the area of child abuse and child fatalities to investigate the circumstances surrounding the death of Thomas, end quote, and that his office's investigation thus far has included reviewing a large number of records and interviewing numerous witnesses. Depending on the findings of its investigation, a special grand jury could recommend reforms to the system on various issues. Steve Ballone weighed in again after Cini's announcement, issuing another statement that read in part, quote, I applaud District Attorney Tim Cini for convening a special grand jury, and I am confident this action will be a catalyst to implement additional necessary reforms, end quote. In response to the utter bullshit being spouted by Michael's attorney LaTurco, Justina uploaded 2 more videos to YouTube in which she questioned her 6-year-old son Andrew about the conditions in Michael and Angela's home, including whether or not the garage contained a space heater, how the boys were punished, for what infractions, and if Thomas and Anthony had any visible injuries. This sweet little guy had plenty to tell her.
Just a question, because I'm trying to figure this out, and really, it's hard for me.
What?
You remember when in old house, right?
Yeah.
You had 2 floors, right? Downstairs and upstairs.
No, 3. Basement.
Oh, the basement was there. And the one part of the house, there was also garage, right?
Yeah, there was a garage.
Did you ever see any heater in the garage?
Any what?
Like heated. Was the garage heated or unheated?
Nope. Just plain old cold.
It was cold?
Yeah, like, so let's say, like, it was like snow in there. But instead there was no, so it's just really cold. It's like you're putting your whole body in snow.
Really?
Yeah.
And was anybody sleeping in the garage?
Thomas and Anthony were.
Thomas and Anthony?
I think.
Was the garage door, you were able to go inside the garage and out, or was the door locked?
Well, sometimes the door was locked.
Sometimes it was locked?
Yeah, when Mom and Dad left, Anthony and Thomas alone in the garage.
Oh, so when Anthony and Tommy were left in the garage, the door was locked? And was there anything else to sleep on in the garage?
No, just the floor.
Just the floor?
And no pillow.
And no pillow?
And no blanket either.
Was Anthony and Tommy try to go inside the house?
Yeah, but the door was locked.
The door was locked?
They couldn't.
Oh my God. What about you? Did you ever sleep in that garage?
No.
No?
Well, once they threw me in there.
For what?
For the same thing I told you a couple of days ago.
Can you remind me? I forgot.
So let's say one of us went downstairs when Mom and Dad left, and
Angela
and Dad.
Okay, Angela and Dad.
They said, there's a sandwich for you on the table. When it's 1 o'clock, go downstairs and eat it. So at 1 o'clock, we got downstairs, they ate it, and we went back upstairs. And then Mom said, you were not supposed to eat that without permission. And then they got in trouble.
Oh my God.
And I got thrown in the garage.
For how long?
For 1 hour.
1 hour? What about Anthony and Tommy? How long did they stay in the garage?
For 2 hours.
2 hours? Was it also, did you know the time of the day that they stay in the garage?
Every day.
Every day?
All day and every day.
Oh my God. And, when did they were taken out of the garage?
Never.
Never? So was there any bathroom in the garage?
No.
So where did they go pee-pee and poopies?
I don't know.
Was there anything else was there any other reason why Dada and Angela put Anthony and Tommy in the garage?
Well, because they kept on peeing themselves.
Kept on peeing themselves?
Yeah, because in the middle of the night they had to go pee.
Okay.
And Mom and Dad wouldn't allow them.
Oh my God. Okay.
And then they kept on peeing in their pants because they weren't allowed to go in the middle of the night to the bathroom. And once I had to stay up all night just in the bathroom just to brush my teeth.
Why?
I had to brush my teeth. I didn't brush my teeth, and I had to. And I almost stayed in the bathroom for like 3 hours when everyone was sleeping.
But who you had to stay in the bathroom?
Until I was finished brushing my teeth.
Who said that?
Angela and Dad.
Angela and Dad? Oh my God. And so was anybody, was Anthony and Tommy try to ask for help, call, or when they were inside the garage, did you hear them?
Yeah. Sometimes they were crying and they said that they really had to go pee.
Okay. And what happened that they couldn't go inside the house?
They had to hold their pee in.
They had to hold it?
Sometimes Angela and Dad stayed out all day. And Auntie Thomas stayed home. With the door locked.
With the door locked? So they weren't able to get out from the garage?
No, but they had to hold their pee in all the time until they came back home.
Did Anthony and Tommy said about this to anybody in school?
No, because they would be punished for like 3 days.
And what would be the punishment? What will happen to them?
Staying in the room for 3 days, not going to be nodding and not doing anything.
Mm-hmm.
Getting slapped in the butt.
Slapped in the butt? Would it hurt? Did you see anything on Anthony and Thomas's body that show bruises, boo-boos?
Almost everywhere.
Almost everywhere?
Like when Dad beat them up, they had like this little thing on their head right here.
Yeah.
It was bleeding, and they had put a Band-Aid on it. And Thomas, like around right here, was like this big.
Okay.
And Thomas said something.
Whose head was that?
That was Auntie's. And Tom said like something right, Mom. And Tom said something like right here. I was playing also too.
And what happened to him when he had a bruise here?
Well, I'm not quite sure. I didn't see what happened next after that.
Was he crying?
Yeah.
Did it hurt him? Did he go to the doctor?
No.
No doctor?
No.
When Tommy and Anthony were in the garage, did they get any food from Dada and Angela?
Only once a day.
Only once a day? And what was the food? What did they get to eat?
Just a sandwich, that's it.
Just a sandwich? Were they saying that they stated that they were hungry?
Yeah.
So when they were in the garage, were you able to go and visit them, or you couldn't?
I couldn't.
Why?
Because they'll get trouble. Too.
Get trouble too? Did you ever see Anthony and Tommy on a video camera from inside the garage?
Well, there was cameras in the garage too.
There were cameras in the garage?
There was one on the ceiling and one like by the doorsteps.
Okay. So when Anthony and Tommy were coming from school,
they had to go in the house and then go in the garage.
They gotta go where?
They had to go in the house to get through and then go in the garage.
But for what? What was the reason that they have to go in the garage immediately?
Because they kept on peeing in their pants.
Oh, God. But did they have accidents in school?
No.
So why? So if they didn't have accidents in school...
That's because we go to the bathroom at school. The teachers allow them.
Okay. And what happened at Dada's house?
The opposite.
The opposite? You're safe now, Andrew.
Justina, who, in my eyes, is an absolute legend and a legit hero, has gone all the way to the top in every possible way in her attempts to save her sons, dating back to well before Thomas's murder. She wrote to U.S. Attorney General William Barr seeking help in her case. She wrote to President Donald Trump and New York Governor Andrew M. Cuomo. She filed complaints with the U.S. Attorney's Office against judges and lawyers in her divorce and family court cases. She filed complaints with the Suffolk County District Attorney's Office alleging police misconduct. She filed a complaint with the Nassau County District Attorney's Office. She's been nothing short of a pit bull with lockjaw, and I'm truthfully amazed by her tenacity and perseverance. I can't say this enough. I'm in absolute awe of Justina's commitment to creating actual, meaningful changes in the systems that were supposed to, but clearly didn't, protect Thomas. Her strength and ferocity have made her a role model for all of us to follow in this never-ending fight against child abuse and injustice. The last clip I'd like to play is another video from Justina, who uploaded this to YouTube on the 1-month anniversary of Thomas's death. Hearing Andrew and Anthony talk about how much they miss their brother is just one more gut-wrenching reminder of why we can never stop fighting to save kids like Thomas.
Tommy, I wish you were alive. You wouldn't have died like this if it wasn't for autographs that were back to you. I wish you were alive so we could spend time with Mom in heaven and have a good life. I'm really sorry that this happened to you. I'll miss you. Rest in peace, my big brother.
I love you, Tommy. And we're sending you kisses from all of us. We miss you. Rest peacefully, our angel in heaven. Anthony, you want to say something to Tommy? What do you want to say to Tommy?
That's it. That's I really miss you so much, Thomas. I wish you were alive.
We miss you. We can wait to see
I wish you were alive.
It's nearly impossible to find a bright side in cases like this, but at the very least, I'm thankful Thomas's case, like many of the cases I feature on both the podcast and the blog, and of course the recent release of the Gabriel Fernandez documentary on Netflix, have brought to light the desperate need for an overhaul of agencies across the country tasked with protecting our nation's most vulnerable children. I can also hope that when we call attention to the outcome of such egregious cases of child abuse, we may in some small way prevent someone from using such vicious punishments against their own children, possibly sparing a child's life. It's a small comfort, but a comfort nonetheless. Since this is an ongoing case, I will continue to provide updates on sufferthelittlechildrenblog.com, as well as here on the podcast as they arise. Rest in peace, Tommy. I hope you knew how much your mommy and your brothers loved you. That's it for this week, guys. Again, stay healthy, be safe, stay as far away from other people as you possibly can, and nurture yourself. Don't let the negative emotions take over. Join me next week for a whole new case. Time for another quick sponsor break, and then you'll hear a few previously released updates. Next is an update that was included in episode 43, Case Update Special, in December of 2020. Next is the story of Thomas Valva, who was the subject of episodes 5 and 6. Thomas was 8 years old when he died on January 17, 2020, after his father, Michael Valva, a New York City police officer, and his fiancée, Angela Pollina, allegedly forced Thomas and his 10-year-old brother, Anthony, both of whom have autism, to spend the night in the unheated garage of the family's Long Island home. Anthony survived. Thomas, unfortunately, succumbed to hypothermia, and he also had injuries to his head, face, knees, elbows, and right flank that did not match Michael's account of Thomas falling down in the driveway that morning. Both Michael Valva and Angela Pollina were arrested and charged with second-degree murder and child endangerment. They have been in custody since their arrests in January, at which time Michael, a 15-year veteran of the NYPD who had, most recently, been assigned to the department's traffic bureau, was suspended without pay pending the outcome of the criminal case. The two have had multiple court hearings throughout the year, although not much of substance has taken place in the case. The most interesting development so far was that in November, Michael voluntarily resigned from the NYPD. According to Michael's attorney, John Laturco, he executed paperwork in that regard, which protects his benefits and his pension. There's no admission of wrongdoing. It allows him to forego the disciplinary hearing, and in exchange, he will no longer receive any salary or any future benefits. Well, so much for protecting his pension, because according to NYPD spokesman Sergeant Jessica McRory, Michael Valva resigned without permission from the police commissioner. He will not be receiving a pension. However, he will receive any money he contributed to the pension system back. Both Michael and Angela have pleaded not guilty to the charges against them and face 25 years to life if convicted. Luterko also told reporters he planned to file a motion for severance of Michael and Angela's cases, saying their defenses are antagonistic. As far as I can tell, that means they're planning to blame each other for Thomas's death. The boys' mother, Justina Zubko-Valva, spent years documenting the abuse Michael doled out on their 3 boys, especially Anthony and Thomas, both of whom had special needs. Thomas and Anthony were often sent to school with inadequate food, wearing filthy, sometimes urine-stained clothing, or even diapers despite their advanced ages. School officials made reports to CPS about this, as well as seeing the boys eat scraps out of garbage cans. Justina repeatedly reported the boys' severe abuse to Child Protective Services, the police, family court, and anyone else who would listen, but her pleas fell on deaf ears. Her story is one of the most egregious examples I've ever seen of the failure of CPS and the family court system to protect children who clearly needed it. I've seen it time and time again. The family court system, unfortunately, tends to favor men, especially those with wealth and connections. In June, Justina filed a $200 million wrongful death lawsuit against multiple parties, including several CPS caseworkers, investigators, and supervisors, the East Moriches Union Free School District, the principal and superintendent of Thomas's school, Nassau County Supreme Court Justice Hope Schwartz Zimmerman, Donna McCabe and Ethan Halpern, both attorneys assigned to represent the Valva boys, Suffolk County Department of Social Services County Attorney Randall Ratchey, and Michael Valva and Angela Pollina. In Justina's filing, her attorney, John Norensberg of Manhattan, stated that the tragedy started on September 6, 2017, when Nassau County Supreme Court Justice Hope Schwartz Zimmerman unlawfully, and without due process, a hearing, or supporting evidence against Ms. Zubko-Valva, gave custody of her 3 children, including Tommy, to Michael Valva, even though a prior judge in the case had barred Valva from overnight visits. Tommy's death was not only foreseeable, but completely preventable. Now get this. Michael's criminal attorney, Luterko, doesn't represent him in the civil lawsuit, but he did have something to say about it. We do concur with his estranged wife that while there was systemic failure by CPS in the lack of their ability to remove the children in a timely manner, after we've reviewed the evidence, we have come to the conclusion that the children should have been managed more properly by CPS, as well as the school system. But that has no impact on our defense in the criminal matter, and we continue to zealously and aggressively assert his innocence as it pertains to the criminal indictment and the top charge of murder in the 2nd degree. Whoops, time for one of my favorite sound bites.
First of all, a fucking pardon?
The fact that Luterko is speaking out of both sides of his mouth by blaming CPS and the school, while also absolving Michael of any blame in Thomas's abuse and death, exemplifies why many people consider attorneys to be soulless and unscrupulous. One final update on Thomas's case before I move on to the next. Justina has also alleged sexual abuse of the boys by Michael and Angela, even mentioning possible child trafficking. It will be interesting to see if those allegations are addressed with criminal charges, or at all for that matter. Justina, a Polish immigrant, recently tweeted, Tommy recently appeared in one of his brother's dream, being thankful for the Gregorian masses that we had ordered in his intention, and stating that they also helped many other souls to receive a gift of heaven. I strongly believe Tommy is in heaven and helps us in this difficult journey, fighting for justice, not only for Tommy and his brothers, but also for all other abused children who cannot defend themselves. The following is a short update from episode 94, Case Update Special number 7, which came out in December of 2021. Way back in episodes 5 and 6, I told you about 8-year-old Thomas Valva, whose story is one of the most egregious cases of multiple child abuse, family court corruption, CPS failure, and narcissistic abuse I've ever heard, let alone told. Thomas and his brothers, Anthony and Andrew, were unjustly yanked from their loving mother's custody in 2017 and given to their father, Michael Valva, an NYPD police officer who lived with his fiancée, Angela Pollina, and her 3 daughters. Justina Zubko-Valva did not see her sons for 2 years prior to Tommy's death. The couple's home on Long Island, New York, was truly a house of horrors. Thomas and Anthony, both of whom were autistic, were abused worst due to their special needs. The 2 boys were malnourished and often begged for food at school, even rummaging for food in the trash cans. From 2018 to 2019, state and county child protection hotlines received 20 calls from school staff reporting absences, a black eye, lacerations, hunger, visible dirt on the body, and urine-soaked clothing. Despite multiple reports, the children were never removed from the Valva Pollina home. On the evening of January 16, 2020, as punishment for some real or imagined transgression, Tommy and Anthony were forced to sleep in the unheated garage attached to the family home on a night when temperatures in Center Moriches reached an overnight low of 19 degrees Fahrenheit. The boys slept on the bare concrete floor, huddled together with no blankets, pillows, or extra clothing to shield them from the cold. The following morning, Tommy was found unresponsive. He was rushed to Long Island Community Hospital, where he was pronounced dead with a core temperature of 76 degrees. His death was ruled a homicide, with a major contributing factor of hypothermia. Michael Valva and Angela Pollina were both arrested and charged with second-degree murder and child endangerment. The boy's mother, Justina, has since filed a $200 million wrongful death lawsuit against officials in Suffolk County and school representatives, alleging that Tommy was abused physically, mentally, and sexually, allegations she has made for years, even prior to Tommy's death. Her surviving boys are now where they belong, in Justina's loving arms. Even though detectives have obtained extremely damning video and audio recordings from within the Valva home, both defendants have pleaded not guilty. In August, Suffolk County Supreme Court Justice William Condon, who will oversee the trial, ruled that key video evidence and other physical evidence would be admissible during trial. These items included a Nest camera, a Ring doorbell video, and a bag of Thomas's clothing, which defense attorneys claimed were obtained illegally by police and should be suppressed. They had also argued that police didn't get the couple's permission to search the home, nor a warrant beforehand. According to a September ruling by Judge Condon, Michael Valva and Angela Pollina will be tried together, but by two separate juries. Later in September, their trial, which was scheduled to begin October 12th, was postponed until January 10, 2022, due to tightening pandemic protocols enacted after the Delta variant came on the scene. The last pre-recorded update is a clip from episode 132, Case Update Special number 8, which I released in February of 2023. In episodes 5 and 6, I told you the story of 8-year-old Thomas Valva. Tommy's story is one of the most egregious cases I've ever heard of multiple child abuse, family court corruption, CPS failure, and narcissistic abuse. Tommy and his two brothers were unjustly yanked from their loving mother's custody in 2017 and handed over to their father, NYPD officer Michael Valva, who lived with his fiancée, Angela Pollina, and her 3 daughters. The boy's mother, Justina Zubko Valva, did not see her sons for the next 2 years. In the Valva Pollina House of Horrors in Center Moriches, Long Island, in New York State, Tommy and his older brother, Anthony, who were both on the autism spectrum, were abused due to their special needs. The 2 boys were malnourished and often begged for food at school or rummaged for food in the trash cans. Despite over 20 calls in a 2-year period to state and county child protection hotlines from school staff reporting absences, a black eye, lacerations, hunger, visible dirt on the body, and urine-soaked clothing, the children were never removed from their father's home. On the evening of January 16, 2020, Tommy and Anthony were forced to sleep in the unheated garage attached to the family home on a night when temperatures in Center Moriches reached an overnight low of 19 degrees Fahrenheit. The boys slept on the bare concrete floor, huddled together with no blankets, pillows, or extra clothing to shield them from the cold. The following morning, Tommy was rushed to Long Island Community Hospital, unresponsive, where he was pronounced dead with a core temperature of 76 degrees. His death was ruled a homicide with a major contributing factor of hypothermia. Michael Valva and Angela Pollina were both arrested and charged with second-degree murder and child endangerment. Even though detectives obtained extremely damning video and audio recordings from within the home, both defendants pleaded not guilty. Jury selection in the joint trial of Michael and Angela began in September of 2022. During that process, Judge William Condon ruled that the 2 would receive separate trials. Michael's trial began on October 6th and went on for several weeks. Prosecutors described the couple's horrific treatment of Tommy and Anthony in particular, where Michael's defense claimed he loved his son and instead pointed the finger at Angela as the abuser. Testimony at the trial revealed that on the morning of his death, Tommy had a bathroom accident, so Michael took him outside and hosed him off with freezing cold water. On November 4, 2022, the jury found Michael guilty on all counts. Teachers from Tommy and Anthony's school attended Michael's sentencing hearing on December 8th, at which the former NYPD officer was sentenced to spend 25 years to life in prison. Last month, Michael's attorneys filed a notice of appeal, which is to be expected. He was transferred to the Elmira Correctional Facility in upstate New York to serve his sentence. The New York Department of Corrections website shows his parole eligibility date as January 18, 2045. Angela Pollina has been held in the Suffolk County Jail since her arrest in January of 2020. Jury selection for her trial is scheduled to begin on February 21, 2023. Once her trial is over, I hope to release an episode focusing on the unthinkable testimony heard in both trials. I'll pause here for another word from my sponsors. Then I'll get into the newly recorded information revealed during the trials of Michael Valva and Angela Pollina. Opening statements in Michael's trial began on September 28, 2022, in New York State's Suffolk County Court. Prosecutor Laura Newcomb told jurors in her opening statement that Thomas's death was the culmination of years of mental and physical abuse directed towards Thomas and his older brother, Anthony. Michael once texted his fiancée, Angela Pollina, about his sons, "I will beat them until they bleed. It is the only thing that works." Ms. Newcomb said that 10-year-old Anthony and 8-year-old Thomas were special needs kids who were beaten, starved, and forced to sleep on puppy pads. The boys were slapped, punched, and thrown downstairs, showing up to school with scratches and bruises. For months, the two boys had to sleep without bedding in the unheated garage, leading to Thomas's hypothermia death on January 17, 2020. She mentioned Michael hosing Thomas off with freezing cold water the morning of his death. She said school staff reported the boys arriving for class in soiled clothing and digging through the trash for food. They were observed at school literally eating crumbs off the floor. She also described the boys as being unbearably thin, with urine squishing in their sneakers at school. During the defense's opening statement, one of Michael's lawyers, Anthony LaPinta, blamed Angela, who he called a wicked, cruel stepmother, for the abuse, saying she nagged Michael about being too lenient with the special needs boys. She once texted him, "You are making it too comfortable for them. Let them be uncomfortable. That will teach them to control themselves." LaPinta begged the jury for empathy, telling them that at the time of Thomas's abuse and death, Michael wasn't financially stable and was just trying to make peace between his sons and his fiancée. He tried his best to salvage the relationship. 11 Bittersweet Lane was becoming more bitter by the day. According to LaPinta, Michael gave the boys mattresses, blankets, books, and a TV in their freezing cold garage dungeon, but after they had bathroom accidents, Angela wouldn't allow the boys to keep them. He said Michael didn't realize his kids could die from the conditions he forced them to live in. LaPinta said, "However troubling, however regretful his words and actions were towards his boys, still doesn't amount to murder. This was not a senseless act of evil. You need to think with your heads and not with your hearts." Claiming Michael didn't want Thomas to die, LaPinta said of his client's behavior, "Whether it's wrong, angers you, makes you irate, the facts don't make out murder." Also on day one, Detective Cassidy Lassard of the 7th Precinct testified about being one of the first on scene at the Center Moriches home and finding Thomas in the basement. She said Michael called 911 an hour after Thomas supposedly fell and hit his head on the driveway. The detective said she performed CPR to no avail on the abnormally cold little boy. Although Michael claimed Thomas fell and hit his head on the concrete driveway on his way to the bus that morning, bus driver Jeanette Mitchell testified, saying she never saw Thomas the day he died. The other kids in the house ran to the bus stop that morning, and she asked them if Thomas was coming, but they said no. Of Thomas, Ms. Mitchell said, "He was a good boy, listen to the rules. Staff from East Moriches Elementary School tearfully testified at Michael's trial, including Thomas's third-grade teacher, Kelly Wilson, who told prosecutor Carrie Ann Kelly that she and the school principal, Edward Schneier, discussed and ultimately agreed to call CPS in early 2019 after Thomas arrived at school with bruises. She testified that Principal Schneier said, "There is something going on in that home." When Thomas returned to school after winter break in January of 2020, Ms. Wilson testified, he looked very frail, and his hands and face were red. He died days later. Thomas's second-grade teacher, Michelle Cagliano, also took the stand. During her testimony, she became so upset that she had to take several breaks. She told the jury she made reports to CPS as well, and that she kept a journal documenting when Thomas begged for food or ate other kids' discarded food or crumbs from the floor. For example, she said, on Tuesday, January 18, 2019, the students returned to school from a 3-day weekend. He told me he didn't eat food all day Monday. He told me his heart was pounding. Christine McQuarrie, who was an educational consultant working with autistic kids in the school district, testified about visiting the family's home for parent training and likening the smell of Anthony's bedroom to that of a city subway. Days after her visit, Michael called Ms. McQuarrie and told her they no longer needed her services. Special education teacher Nicole Papa testified that Thomas and Anthony's health declined over time. They just didn't look like the same child. They were thin and frail and not the same. When you would hug them, you could feel their bones. Ms. Papa said she called CPS many times regarding behavior issues, bruises, weight loss, and the fact that the boys weren't given breakfast. CPS, she said, basically blew off the concerns. Once, CPS attended a school faculty meeting, during which Ms. Papa angrily said to them, "We have a family in the school district abusing children. We call you and you find it unfounded." Principal Schneier testified that the boys looked extremely emaciated, and that staff noticed the decline in their condition during the 2019 to 2020 school year. He said, "We felt like, as a team, we were not getting the results we wanted to see. We decided, as a team, we were going to just flood the CPS hotline with calls." Staff called CPS about 20 times, reporting injuries, incidents in which the boys arrived at school with urine-soaked backpacks, and the fact that the boys couldn't control their bowels. After this glut of reports, the principal said, Michael became belligerent and accused the school of harassment. The principal was also a volunteer firefighter and was called to the home the day of Thomas's death. He said, "I knew that address because I had to put it in the CPS reports." Anthony's third-grade teacher from 2018 to 2019, Jennifer Hallborough, testified that she, too, watched the boy's condition deteriorate. She kept a special red sweatshirt for Anthony in class because he was always hungry and cold. He didn't take the sweatshirt home because he said he would get in trouble or it would get taken away. She made a report to CPS about a bruise on Anthony's arm in the shape of an adult hand. Teachers testified about giving the boys food despite Michael's instructions not to feed them. School psychologist Renee Emin testified about the boys' emaciation, saying Thomas would scream and cry that he was hungry. Once in May of 2019, she said, Thomas admitted to a CPS investigator who visited the school that he and Anthony slept in the garage, were hosed down outside, and had to use the bathroom outside, over a hill in the backyard. She said, Thomas said he and Anthony slept in the garage. He said they stayed in the garage because they have accidents. Of the boys, she said, their hands were always red. I can't even describe it enough to give you a vivid picture. It's an image that haunts all of us. The boys were hungry during weekly counseling sessions, she said. Thomas throughout would cry and repeatedly state he was hungry, to the point it was difficult to continue our counseling session. She said she started bringing snacks for the boys. Once, she said, Thomas winced when he sat down, telling her, the school nurse, and a CPS caseworker that his bottom hurt. The nurse examined Thomas and took a photo showing bruising. His bottom had a handprint, Ms. Emmons said, saying that when she asked who hurt him, he said his dad. Once, she testified, Thomas came to school with a new haircut that exposed a large bump on his head and a spot that looked bald to the root. He said his father threw a backpack with a flower pot at him. After the testimony of multiple teachers, defense attorney John LaTurco pointed out that he thought the teachers admitted in their testimony that Michael was active in his kids' lives. He participated in their schooling. He cared about what was happening. Regardless of how you feel about his disciplinary actions, he certainly cares about his boys. I think we'll agree to disagree on that point. Another witness was Edward Concilio, the husband of Angela's first cousin, who stayed at the family's home 3 or 4 days a week for about a year in 2019 for work reasons. He became aware that Anthony and Thomas were forced to sleep in the garage on December 19, 2019, when he saw the two sitting in the garage with 2 tents, sleeping bags, and a thin mattress. At one point during his stay, Mr. Concilio said, Michael blew up over an email from a teacher saying Thomas had stolen a jar of M&Ms from the classroom. Michael, he said, exploded, saying he was going to handcuff Thomas and that if he wants to be a perp, I'm going to treat him like a perp. Mr. Concilio told defense attorney Anthony LaPinta that he didn't confront Angela because of her hair-trigger temper. Nor did he contact police or CPS about the abuse and neglect he witnessed, admitting on the stand that he avoided reporting the situation because he didn't want to deal with his cousin's anger. I can't stress enough that this case truly proves that if you see something, you must say something. The family's cleaning lady, Tyrene Rodriguez, testified that on the day Thomas died, she heard him cry twice. She asked Angela what happened, and Angela told her that Thomas fell. At one point while she was cleaning the bathroom, Ms. Rodriguez saw Angela, Michael, and Thomas walking from the garage to the basement. Michael was helping Thomas to walk, almost cradling him. About 10 minutes later, Angela came running back upstairs, saying, Ty, Thomas isn't breathing. When she ran downstairs, Ms. Rodriguez testified, Thomas was cold, clammy, wet, and naked, and his skin and lips were blue. She cried as the 911 recordings were played. Ms. Rodriguez said she helped Michael give Thomas CPR on the couch and then on the floor. Defense attorney LaTurco took this as an opportunity to prove Michael's devotion to his son, saying, Michael Valva was performing life-saving measures on Thomas, and the cleaning lady provided corroboration of that fact. She assisted in that. He said his client was a terrible parent with significant deficiencies, but he loved his son and tried to save him. During the trial, Detective Guy Gehrig of Suffolk Police Electronic Investigations gave testimony that several key surveillance videos captured inside the home on the day of Thomas's death were deleted by someone with access to the account. When he received access to the Nest camera system, he started downloading videos at 10 p.m. on January 17, 2020. 6 hours later, an admin on the Nest account changed the password, preventing the detective from accessing the account. After this, Detective Gehrig said, most of the important footage was deleted. What was available was played for the jury. In audio from one recording, Michael could be heard screaming, What is wrong with you? And Wake up, are you alive? Are you alive? Are you alive? Prosecutors showed the jury text messages demonstrating Michael and Angela's increasing frustration over Thomas and Anthony's problems with incontinence. On November 16, 2019, after he learned his sons had toilet accidents, Michael texted Angela, I'll beat them up again. Talking don't work. Maybe a bloody face will. He already peed? No problem. I'll be kicking his ass again. Tell them I'm going to kick their ass again. Like I said, I'm going to hit them with a belt. In one text message read in court, Michael wrote to Angela, My son is not going to be treated like an outcast anymore. Mr. LaTurco was all over this, saying the messages showed that Angela locked the boys in the garage as far back as 2018, but that Michael resisted. He said, Michael loved his children regardless of his horrible decision-making. He did not want to see Thomas die. One of the case's lead detectives, Sergeant Norberto Flores, testified about video shown to the jury that was captured both inside and outside the Bittersweet Lane home on January 17, 2020. In one of the clips, the sergeant testified, Thomas, who was naked, could be seen falling repeatedly in the backyard with his father yelling at him, You fell on concrete. Can't send you to school, you fucking idiot. Another clip, which was recorded less than an hour before Thomas died, showed Michael yelling at his son, God damn you. Get up, fucking slob, get up. This man was talking to his own autistic 8-year-old son. Sergeant Flores also testified that he interviewed Michael and Angela separately and that they both told him Thomas had fallen that morning. At the end of the interview, he said, Michael put his head in his hands and cried. Both Angela and Michael told the sergeant that none of the other kids saw Thomas the day he died, but the prosecution pointed out this couldn't be true because in one of the surveillance videos, a child's voice asked why Thomas couldn't walk, and another child asked if they should get Thomas a granola bar. Also testifying during the trial was Dr. Michael Kaplan, Suffolk County's chief medical examiner, who said he believed Thomas's cause of death was hypothermia. He described photos shown to the jury discussing fresh injuries on Thomas's face, head, elbow, knees, and torso, and saying all of the injuries could not have been sustained in one fall. Autopsy photos depicted bruises on Thomas's head, forehead, nose, eyelid, and upper lip, which the medical examiner said had to be recent. He had examined Thomas's brain, which he said was normal, with no bleeding, bruising, or swelling. The doctor said he was initially told that Thomas fell on his way to the bus, but that Sergeant Flores later told him that Thomas may have been kept in a cold garage. Dr. Kaplan said, "How they live can certainly be a clue to how they die." The defense continued to try to mitigate the damning evidence against Michael by presenting witnesses who testified that Michael was upset about his son's death. Michael chose not to take the stand. Finally, on November 4, 2022, after 7 hours of jury deliberations, Michael Valva was found guilty on all counts, including second-degree murder and 4 counts of endangering the welfare of a child in Thomas's death and the abuse of his sons. After the verdict, Suffolk County District Attorney Ray Tierney said, "What happened in the courtroom does not change the unbelievable tragedy of this case. But thanks in large part to the great work of the DA's office and our police department working together, we can give Thomas and Anthony Valva a small measure of justice." One of the jurors, Thaddeus Brewer, later told News 12 that the jury did not agree on the depraved indifference part of the second-degree murder charge when they first voted on their verdict. They then asked for the charges to be read back to them, and they also requested to hear the full audio of Michael's foul-mouthed rant while he hosed Thomas off in the backyard that morning. Mr. Brewer said,
"Just the fact that he didn't care whether his son lived or died, that was, hearing the video again and seeing that, we knew immediately that it was going to be second-degree murder. Just hearing the details about, how the kids were being treated and just the mishandling of them and, eating out of garbage cans and it was tough. It was really hard."
He told the news station that the hardest testimony to hear for him was that of a plumber who was working in the home. Mr. Brewer said,
"You could see he was upset. And, the way he described that Angela, she said, 'This is the way I take care of effing business.' She walks up, grabs the little boy, and throws him down 2 flights of stairs, while the father just sat there and did nothing."
Many of the jurors attended Michael's sentencing hearing on December 8, 2022, wanting to see justice done for Thomas and Anthony. During his sentencing, Michael addressed the court, saying,
"Your Honor, first I want to express to you and everyone involved in this case, sorry, that I am truly sorry. I am regretful, ashamed, heartbroken, and grief-stricken, standing here before you, having contributed to the death of my son Thomas. I love Thomas with all my heart, as I still love Anthony and Andrew. Never in my worst nightmare would I imagine being responsible for Thomas's death. My sons mean everything to me. I wanted them to grow up in a loving and happy family. I fought so hard to obtain custody for my boys because I wanted to give them the best life that they could possibly have, together with my fiancée and her 3 daughters. We had such a promising and exciting future together as one big happy family. Yet our family didn't grow as I expected. I'm sorry. As it became more and more difficult to all live together, I terribly failed my boys instead of providing them with unconditional love, support, and a home that was safe, comfortable, and nurturing. My actions were neglectful and abusive to my boys, resulting in the tragic death of Thomas. I'm sorry. I lost focus on how to be a good father. Instead of simply leaving Angela and bringing my boys out of that house, I stayed thinking I could make it work. I was so wrong. Judge Condon, I did not want my son to die. I never imagined he would have died. However, I lost my way and convinced myself that punishments were temporary and eventually would get us back to normal. I was so wrong that it cost Thomas his life. I am so sorry to Thomas, Anthony, and Andrew, and to and everybody involved in this case. I apologize to all the teachers at East Mauritius School District, the CPS workers, and all persons negatively impacted by my actions. I am also deeply sorry to Justina, as she also lost a son. Despite our differences, I recognize her loss and her everlasting grief. Your Honor, I accept your sentence, as I already sentenced myself to a lifetime filled with extreme regret, remorse, and grief. And finally, I'd like to thank my lawyers for all their tireless efforts and help on my behalf. John Laturco, Anthony LaPinta, and Sabato Capone. Thank you, Your Honor.
It was only after I heard Michael's speech that I realized that throughout all of my coverage of Thomas's case, I've been pronouncing his mother's name incorrectly. I don't know if you caught that, but Michael, who was married to her for several years, pronounced her name Justina. After Michael's statement, Judge William Condon addressed Michael directly.
All right, thank you, Mr. Valva. I did so at the conclusion of the trial. I think it's worth saying it again, that all 6 of these attorneys, I know how hard all of you worked. This was the most stressful trial I've ever been a part of, as either a lawyer or a judge. And I acknowledge Mr. Laturco, Mr. LaPinta, Mr. Capone took this case when many other lawyers would not. And I respect that. And I respect your dedication to the legal system. Thank you. And I'm going to extend that commendation to the staff here as well. Everybody who took part in this trial lost sleep, didn't eat, had nightmares. It was difficult for everyone. One question still beguiles me, though. How did all of us, as a community, allow this to happen? And I acknowledge this is not the appropriate forum to have that discussion, but it needs to happen. And in saying that, I am in no way impugning the good teachers and administrators at East Mauritius. Anybody who watched this trial knows that the tears that flowed from that witness stand were genuine. Those teachers and administrators cared. They certainly tried. I appreciate your, and I think you are sincere in saying that you're sorry, Mr. Valva. I really do. And I don't think you intended to kill Thomas, not at all. In fact, you were not charged with intentionally killing him. But there's no getting around the fact that Thomas and Anthony lived their young lives under constant duress in the place where they should have felt safest, their own home. I'm going to quote from the pre-sentence report, quote, "The events that eventually led to the victim's death were the result of a culmination of decisions and behaviors over an extended period of time. Despite being made aware of his children's declining conditions, the defendant persisted in his abusive ways. Rather than be his children's protector, He was a warden who starved and abusively punished them. And when one considers that Mr. Valva had a career as a New York City police officer, it makes your actions that much more unimaginable, to be candid. An 8-year-old boy who right now should be getting excited for Christmas is dead. I speak to everybody out there. We can never let this happen again. And that's all I'll say from this bench.
Judge Condon then sentenced Michael to the maximum sentence of 25 years to life in the New York Department of Corrections. Jury members spoke to reporters after the sentencing, saying they thought the punishment was justified. Juror Scott Cruzen said,
"He's getting exactly what he deserves, and, Laturka said that he loved his kids. His definition of love must be different than mine. I have three girls. I couldn't imagine any father doing, what he did to his kids."
Juror Christina Anselmo said,
"I believe there's some remorse there. I don't think he intended on that happening, but he sure enough didn't do anything to stop it. So that's what makes him guilty."
By January of 2023, Michael's attorneys announced they had filed a notice of appeal. In the meantime, Michael is now serving his sentence in the Clinton Correctional Facility in Dannemora. I wonder if he's had the occasion to speak with Raisheem Smith, who's also serving 25 years to life at Clinton for the 2016 murder of his girlfriend's 6-year-old son, Zymir Perkins, whose story I told in episode 3 of this podcast. I'll pause here for one last sponsor break, and then we'll get into the trial of Angela Pollina. Jury selection in Angela's trial began on February 22, 2023, and ended 2 days later after 12 jurors and 6 alternates were selected. Hundreds of potential jurors were dismissed that week after the judge asked if they could remain impartial in the case. Opening arguments began on Monday, February 27th before Judge Tim Motze, with prosecutor James Scahill stating that Angela and Michael were both responsible for Thomas's death after years of abuse, maltreatment, and neglect. They described Angela as a disciplinarian who wanted to exile Thomas and Anthony to the unheated garage. Angela's defense attorney, Matthew Toohey, whose name I've also been mispronouncing all this time, told the jury the case was simple, complex, and tragic, telling them not to get stuck in the mud, but to focus on what happened the day Thomas died. Saying Angela herself planned to take the stand, Mr. Toohey said, "What I promised the jury is full transparency. We're going to come out and own up to what was not good, what was wrong, but she is going to tell the jury she had no part in what happened." Angela's mother and sister attended the first day of trial, and at one point, Angela looked back and started to cry. By the beginning of day 2, 2 jurors had already been dismissed. School staff again testified at Angela's trial, giving the same information they provided at Michael's. Defense attorney Toohey said the school staff wasn't there the day Thomas died, adding, "Obviously, they're going to give a little perspective about the struggles the boys had, and probably with the way they were treated, but the reality is that it doesn't go to the day in question." Dr. Kaplan, the medical examiner, testified at Angela's trial that Thomas had experienced the effects of hypothermia even before his death, as evidenced by his red hands and face in some photos. Angela took the stand in her own defense on March 7, 2023, crying frequently throughout her testimony, during which she admitted to banishing Thomas and Anthony to the garage during her tumultuous relationship with Michael. "I exiled them. I didn't know what to do. It was evil and horrible." The night before Thomas died, Angela said, she was aware that Thomas and Anthony were sleeping in the garage, saying that she and Michael agreed to make them sleep there. The next morning, she said, she and Michael spent some time chit-chatting in the kitchen about bills. Soon afterward, she heard Michael screaming from downstairs, saying that Thomas had shit himself and that he was a mess. Anthony was dry, but Thomas was full of poop, on the back of his pants and on his shirt. I was very upset and disappointed. She went back to the kitchen, she said, but then heard screaming from the backyard. I heard him yell, "You fucking idiot." I yelled for him to lower his voice. Then she peered out the window through the blinds and saw Thomas, naked, standing directly in front of the window, his hands on his butt. There were soap suds on the floor. Michael put down the hose. I just shook my head. I said, "What the fuck?" I was shocked by what I saw. He had taken the punishment to a whole different level. She admitted she was worried the neighbors would hear Michael screaming at Thomas. It was embarrassing and it was very upsetting to me. Then, she said, Michael came storming in, after which she heard yelling in the garage. He threw the door open and told me Thomas had fallen and hit his head on the concrete and we couldn't send him to school. While she was talking to the cleaning lady in the kitchen, Angela said, Michael calmly came in and said he needed to see her in the garage. Thomas was on the garage floor, wearing no shirt, just sweatpants, with a urine-soaked towel covering him. Angela tried to make herself look like a loving parental figure by claiming the following. I sat on the ground. He sat on my lap. He was crying, very uncomfortable and in pain. He was grinding his teeth, and I put my finger near his mouth and he bit at it. I wiped his tears. I put my hand on his forehead to feel the bump and wipe his nose, and he said, "Ow, ow, ow." She said Thomas felt cold, but he didn't appear to be in immediate danger. Angela testified that Michael put Thomas on the toilet in the basement and went to turn off the outside water valve, then told her he wanted to put Thomas in the tub to clean him. I said, absolutely not. He was already shivering. I told him to use toilet paper. I had blankets. He just hosed him off. Now he wanted to put him in a bath? She said she went upstairs to get a space heater, returning to the basement to find that Michael had Thomas in the tub anyway. I said, what the fuck are you doing? Angela cried while she testified that when she looked at Thomas, his eyes were closed. I called his name out and he didn't answer me. I called him again. He didn't answer. I said, Mike, he's not answering me. Mike grabbed my hand and put his fingers on my chest and Thomas's chest and said, he's not breathing. She then panicked, ran for a phone, and called 911. Angela said that the boys' incontinence issues started on the very first night after Michael got full custody in September of 2017 and got worse, eventually becoming a point of contention between her and Michael. During football, Angela said, she noticed the boys started losing weight, so they went to a doctor who told them to use Boost. Michael bought them a different shake that was made for adults, which she said made the peeing worse and gave Thomas diarrhea. Of Michael, she said, I tried to speak to him about it and got nowhere. Due to an agreement Michael made with Justina, Angela was not allowed to feed, bathe, clean, or have physical contact with the boys, which she said made it very hard, very difficult, because she couldn't sleep with the boys to comfort them. Their incontinence issues, she said, made me very angry. She also admitted to taking out her anger at Michael on the boys, saying, Yes, I was wrong. Yes, I was evil. I was horrible. I'm not justifying it. I took it out on them. I exiled them. On cross-examination the next day, Angela admitted that the boys not only slept in the garage for months, but were also forced to eat their meals and do their homework there. She told Michael he was making it too comfortable for them, so Michael would remove items like books. Angela told prosecutor Carrie Ann Kelly she was repulsed by Thomas and Anthony, calling them filthy and stinky, although she claimed Michael was the one who wouldn't let them use the bathroom or shower inside the house. Ms. Kelly asked Angela if any of the other 4 kids in the house, or her or Michael, had ever slept in the garage, asking, You and Michael didn't give it a go? Angela replied, No. Even the dog slept in a warm, insulated pantry. After Michael got a second job as security guard at a library, Angela said, the boys continued to stay in the garage, where she said Michael had put them. Ms. Kelly said, You could have said, come into the warm house, but you never did that, did you? Angela said she did so 3 times, but Michael found out and got angry. I did the best I could. I wasn't their biological parent. I did the best I could with the circumstances I had. Ms. Kelly pointed out that Angela's texts to Michael indicated she wanted the boys out of her home, and that she felt the garage was too comfortable. The text read, Everything is coming out of there. Books, clothes. You've made it too comfortable a punishment because you've made it a home. You shouldn't make it a home for them. She also admitted to deleting most of the surveillance footage from the day Thomas died, saying it had occurred to her how horrible it was to make the 2 boys live in the garage. When Ms. Kelly accused her of deleting the videos and lying to protect herself, Angela replied, I did it for him and for myself, for both of us. It was wrong. When Angela insisted she fed the boys one of their shakes and a granola bar for breakfast every day, Ms. Kelly read a 2017 text Angela sent Michael, which read, "I don't care. They're going to school. No fucking breakfast." Another text from Angela to Michael read, "I'm not feeding nobody. I'm done with the stupidity of your children. I'm taking care of my own fucking kids. CPS had better not send me no more reports." On the morning Tommy died, Ms. Kelly asked Angela, did she tell any of the first responders that she thought Thomas was hypothermic or that he'd slept in an unheated garage? No, Angela replied, because the EMTs weren't talking to her, and she was busy being comforted by the lady who cleaned their house. Ms. Kelly pointed at Angela, telling the jury, she didn't care one iota about that child. Not one bit. The jury deliberated for less than a day before returning with a verdict on Friday, March 10, 2023, finding Angela guilty on all charges. Attorney Toohey said after the verdict, "I am very upset, and obviously she is devastated." Suffolk County District Attorney Ray Tierney said, "I think, unlike other cases, we have the video and we had the text messages. It really created a compelling story of what happened to these poor boys." The jury in Angela's trial spoke to News 12 after the verdict. Juror Nick Paisano said he had heightened emotions during the trial, but you also have to be able to put those emotions to the side and judge it strictly on the facts in the case, the evidence presented, and I think we did a great job doing that. Angela's sentencing took place on April 11, 2023. District Attorney Carrie Ann Kelly's statement to the court was spellbinding, revealed more than we learned through the news reporting on the testimony in the trial, and even got the DA herself choked up for a moment. Here is Ms. Kelly's statement in its entirety.
Your Honor, I also just want to point out I have had an opportunity to read the PSI in its entirety, and two things stand out to me from that I'd just like to point out for the court. The first one is, not once did the defendant indicate in any way, shape, or form that she was sorry for what happened to 8-year-old Thomas Valva, an 8-year-old little boy who has now lost his life. Not once does she indicate that she's simply sorry that that happened, a little boy who lived in her house for 2 years. Not even sorrowful that he died. Nothing. And in addition to that, the second thing that stands out to me, there were 5 other children living in that household. Not once does she indicate that she was sorry for what they endured and what they witnessed in that house. She testified, I was evil and I was cruel, and those children witnessed it. Not once does she indicate that she is sorry for that either. And that speaks volumes, in my humble opinion, about who this defendant is and why I am standing here today recommending 25 years to life. Your Honor, the staff at the East Moriches Elementary School, Thomas and Anthony's teachers, the principal, the school psychologist, they're all here in the courtroom today. They testified twice regarding this matter. They all tried to help those 2 little boys, both Thomas and Anthony. They recognized the issues that they had. They did the best they could. They flooded CPS with calls. They got no help, but thank God for them, because that's the only place those 2 little boys found any love or support in their very, very short little lives. And after 3 years of looking at the videos and listening to the voices and reading the text messages, trying to make sense of what does not make any sense at all, something our hearts do not want to believe, but our brains force us to. We have to accept it because of the Nest video and the text messages from the defendant's cell phone that made something that is the stuff of horror movies a reality for Thomas and Anthony. Thomas, who was just 8 years old when he died, and Anthony was just 10 years old. Video and text messages that the defendant admitted under oath were authentic and accurate, her words and her actions. We saw the photo that Thomas's teacher, Kelly Wilson, took the day before he died. His smile, his thumbs up, telling us that Thomas was still young and innocent and thought that goodness and love could return to his life. Except that it wasn't. Because what we know from the evidence in this case, beyond any doubt, is that Thomas wasn't surrounded by love the day that he died, as he should have been. He was surrounded by nothing other than pure evil, as admitted to by this defendant. The redness of his hand and cheeks was symbolic of that evil, as I argued to the jury, a result of the horrific living conditions he had been fighting day in and day out, as this defendant admitted in her testimony. When he wasn't at school, Thomas was exiled to the freezing cold garage, the freezing cold cement floor. He was sleeping, eating, doing his homework in the garage along with Anthony. They had no blankets, no pillows, no mattress. That was because of the defendant. They were wearing pull-ups instead of being allowed to use one of the 4 bathrooms inside the house. And they were washing in the backyard in cold water and freezing temperatures because of this defendant. In the morning Thomas died, just to remind the court, it was 19 degrees outside. Your Honor, again, in my most humble opinion, Thomas was a profile in courage. He stared down the faces of evil he endured each day, the faces of his own father, and this defendant who was the mother figure in his life for the 2 years prior to his death. Thomas bravely battled a war. His body ultimately lost to hypothermia, all brought on by this defendant's cruelty. As Your Honor considers the sentence to be imposed on this defendant, please consider how 8-year-old Thomas spent what should have been special events in the last months of his short life. His last birthday on September 14th of 2019, he was chastised by this defendant because his teacher, Mrs. Wilson, was kind enough to bring in sweets in celebration of Thomas's birthday. His last Halloween on October 31st of 2019, he was dressed as a prisoner, which he was. His last Thanksgiving in 2019 was spent in the garage with Anthony, and he wondered what Black Friday was, as we all heard when we listened to that particular audio from November 26th of 2019. His last Christmas in 2019 was spent day in and day out in the garage, as the defendant admitted. And after that vacation, Thomas and Anthony both came back to school a couple of weeks before Thomas died. And as the teachers described for you, they were unkempt, disheveled, tired, cold, limping at times, emotional, throwing up one morning, and smelling of urine and feces. I can only imagine how much worse it would have been had Thomas and Anthony not had each other to endure the cold and the dark together in those last days as Thomas lay dying on that cold garage floor. Imagine how much more frightening and lonely it would have been. Thomas unwittingly sacrificed his life so that his brothers and those other 4 children who lived in that house would be saved. And I'd ask Your Honor to consider what Thomas lost when he died at the age of 8. He never went to junior high school. He never went to high school. He'll never learn how to drive. He'll never have a first date. He'll never buy his first house. He'll never get married and have children. All the things that this defendant has been able to enjoy in her lifetime. And the stress of what he went under was testified to by Dr. Kaplan. Instead of being an otherwise happy, healthy 8-year-old little boy, he suffered from a stress-induced alopecia, a stress-induced chronic kidney infection, and a stress-induced involuted thymus. The stress caused all by this defendant's admittedly cruel and evil treatment of him. Thomas was an 8-year-old little boy who should have looked forward to playing with the dog, or watching his favorite TV show, or figuring out what Christmas gift to open next. Instead, he was figuring out how to stay warm in a freezing cold garage. He was forced to call this defendant Mom, and to use his words to get food. He was screamed at her and denied food when he didn't do what she wanted, when he didn't obey her irrational demands. And we know all that thanks to the next video. Your Honor, I would also ask you to consider, in addition to the 2 or 2.5 years of torture that he endured at the hands of this defendant prior to his death and while living under her household, and living with her while his father went off to work in the city. She's the one who put him in the garage. Never once said, you know what, boys, stay in your room. You don't have to go out there, your father won't know. Didn't do anything like that. Instead, she acknowledged in her testimony that even on the day that Thomas died, she owed him a duty of care. And yet, Thomas woke up in the garage the morning of his death in the same clothes he'd worn to school the day before, urinating and defecating on himself as he lay on the freezing cement garage floor dying of hypothermia. Not once did she ask if he was okay. Not once did she suggest that the boys come inside where it was warm. Not once did she offer the use of the bathroom to clean him up. Even on that one occasion, she couldn't show him kindness or mercy. But instead, she became enraged, and she made it all about her, as it always was, as we saw from the evidence in this case. To Michael Valva, she said, "And you can't beat the shit out of him for peeing for me every fucking morning, right?" It's a game with them, and it's fucking ridiculous. It's all over the floor. And then to Thomas and Anthony, you and you, I'm disappointed in both of you. I'm very upset. You pee for me, but you're good for your father. You're shitting for your father every time he's home. That's what she says to the two little autistic boys the morning that 8-year-old Thomas died. That's not someone who got stuck in the mud that morning. That's someone who was much in the play as ever. And that morning was no different than any other, except that Michael Valva happened to be home and not at work. Thomas was then forced outside to clean himself up because of the defendant. And I'm just going to point to one exchange that sums it all up. When Anthony knocked on the garage door, and the garage door was opened, and he said, "Dad, can I have a drink of water, please?" And Michael was fine with it until she got involved. And she said, "You're giving him water before he goes on the bus? I never do that." Michael's immediate reaction? Take a drink at school. Doing exactly what she would do, as he always did. And he's culpable, and he's been punished for doing that, but it was her rules and her punishment imposed. And of course, then she told Anthony, "Don't act differently when your father's here. Never do I give him a sip in the morning. Bullshit. I'm always watching. No different because your father's home. Bullshit, Anthony." She wasn't stuck in the mud that day, as counsel argued. She ruled that household that day just like she did every day, with an iron fist, in a tyrannical and admittedly evil, cruel fashion. She even knew that Thomas was hypothermic that morning. She explained it to her 7-year-old, who didn't understand why Thomas couldn't walk. And she knew that he had fallen on cement pavers and had 2 gigantic lumps on his head, as Michael Valva told her. And tragically for Thomas, she stayed in the play and treated him as she always did, with a complete and utter disregard for his welfare. Not once did she offer to call a doctor or suggest calling 911, even though he was a quote-unquote bloody fucking mess, according to Michael Valva. Instead, she tried to manipulate that jury into believing that she held Thomas that morning and wiped away his tears. Well, Your Honor, you sat through the trial. That was belied by the evidence in this case. She repeatedly referred to Thomas and Anthony through text messages, most of them accompanying videos of the boys in the garage, referring to them as dirty, stinky, filthy, and disgusting. 8- and 10-year-old little boys who were under her care. On November 13th of 2019, garage stinks. I walked in, they both start getting dressed, and I told them to stop. I didn't ask you to get dressed. That's how she treated an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old. I don't care. I don't give a fuck. I'm not wiping asses. I told you I won't go in there, and I will not help. I threw their shakes at them, and that's it. I want my garage and home back the way it was. This is bullshit. I feel disgusted to go in my own garage. Those are her words. She didn't go in that garage on January 17th and hold that child. The night of January 3rd of 2020 at 7:59 p.m., both boys sleeping in the garage. January 4th of 2020 at 2:45 a.m. The defendant's words, "The way Anthony behaves has nothing to do with not having a bed or blanket." Both boys sleeping in the garage that night. On January 5th of 2020, 12 days before Thomas died, "I need to bleach the garage floor tomorrow. It's soaked." She didn't suddenly decide that she didn't mind sitting on the urine-soaked floor to hold Thomas, who in her words was filthy. On January 5th of 2020 at 7:38 a.m., everything is coming out of there, meaning the garage, books, clothes, etc. They too comfortable of a punishment because you, referring to Michael Valva, made it a home. There should not be one thing that belongs in a bedroom in there. That night, both boys sleeping on the garage floor, and she mocked Thomas. That SOB Thomas went in the dirty laundry basket, took the towel to cover himself. She sent a video of Thomas to Michael Valva, showing Thomas pulling the towel out and putting it over himself. It was 33 degrees that night. And then at 9:30 p.m., sending another video and text. Watch how he sneaks. Nothing phases him. And at 3:23 a.m., when Michael texted, "It's real cold out, snowing, boys better not get hypothermia," and he said that Thomas told him they're both shivering, no response to that text message. And those boys continued to spend that night in the garage as well. The law requires that for her conviction of murder in the second degree, the defendant be sentenced to a term of state incarceration. Fortunately for her, Your Honor, unlike Thomas's prison cell, hers will come with access to a bathroom and a shower. She's guaranteed to have 3 meals a day. She won't have to use words to get them, and she will not have to eat them in her cell, and she won't have to eat crumbs off the floor. She'll have a mattress, a blanket, and a pillow, all the comfort she denied Thomas and Anthony. She'll be able to leave herself for recreation or go to the library. Ironically, prison life will be better than the hell she subjected 8-year-old Thomas and 10-year-old Anthony to, and she will be surrounded by adults who will protect her from harm, something Thomas and Anthony experienced absolutely at school, absolutely not at home. And thankfully, there will be no children for her to manipulate and scream and curse at, and no children for her to inflict torturous punishment on. Your Honor, the suffering this defendant inflicted that resulted in Thomas's death deserves nothing less than the maximum sentence of 25 years to life, and I would ask that you so sentence the defendant at this time.
I won't bother playing defense attorney Tui's statement to the court because it was full of pathetic excuses and attempts to justify Angela's disgusting behavior, just like everything else he and his client said throughout the trial. Finally, after Angela declined to say anything at her own sentencing hearing, not even a word of remorse, Suffolk County Supreme Court Justice Timothy Matsei handed down his sentence, but not without some deservedly harsh words for the convicted child killer.
Ms. Pollina, like most people in this county, I was aware of this case from the trial, that spineless, poor excuse of a man, ex-fiancé of yours. But it wasn't until I heard and saw what you said and did in this trial that I think we all realized how evil you really are and really were. And evil's not the word that I came up with. That's the word that you came up with to describe yourself, to describe the treatment of what you did to those poor little innocent boys. You tortured those boys. You tortured them. I looked up the definition of torture in the dictionary. You know what torture means? Something that causes agony or pain. The infliction of intense pain to punish, coerce, or afford sadistic pleasure. That's what you did. And never once, as Miss Kelly said, never once have you ever showed any sorrow or compassion for what happened to those little boys. I've had the opportunity to visit the prison where you will be sent. It's where all females in the state of New York go. My only regret, Ms. Pollina, is they don't have a garage there with no heat and no mattress and no blankets and no pillows. And what was it, Miss Kelly? Nothing that belongs in a bedroom. So where you could sleep the rest of your life, because that's where you deserve to be for the rest of your natural life.
Judge Matsei then sentenced Angela Pollina to spend 25 years to life in state prison for the murder of 8-year-old Thomas Valva. After the sentencing, DA Ray Tierney spoke to the press, saying, "The case and the trials that ensued were not only heartbreaking, but they were also infuriating. As I've said before, while the story of these two defendants ends here, the pursuit of justice for Thomas and Anthony is not over. We will continue to look into exactly what happened in this case, to take testimony, to make recommendations, and to, at the very least, do everything we can to ensure something like this never happens again. We want to use our investigative power to look and to confirm what's happening with the system, and most importantly, let's improve it. Ms. Kelly told the media she called Thomas a profiling courage because I can't go in my garage now without picturing those two little boys. I can't tell you the countless number of times I've watched that video and either seen them curled up on the floor or staring at the camera. It's dark in the garage and you see their little eyes just looking at the camera. She said there was also a life-sized werewolf in the garage, looming over Thomas and Anthony while they slept. So when I say a profiling courage, what courage he had to go into that garage every single night and every single day and go to school soaked in urine and feces and hold his head up and smile and try really, really hard. Thomas did well in school, had beautiful handwriting, and was a smiling, happy, well-loved child at school. Ms. Kelly said, "That's courage to me." Angela is serving her sentence in the Bedford Hills Correctional Facility in Westchester, New York. She'll be keeping company with the likes of Lacey Spears, who was convicted in March of 2015 of the same charge as Angela, second-degree depraved indifference murder. Lacey's conviction is for causing the January 2014 death of her 5-year-old son, Garnet, whose story I told in episodes 58 and 59, which were the first 2 parts of my series on Munchausen syndrome by proxy. LaShawna Charlton is also serving her 20-year sentence at Bedford Hills for the 2020 murder of her 18-year-old daughter, Trayana Somerville, whose story I told in episode 20. Trayana died after her mother bashed her knee with a hammer, which led to a severe septic infection. The infection, along with malnutrition and Benadryl intoxication, caused Trayana's death. After Angela's sentencing, Suffolk County Presiding Officer Kevin McCaffrey released a statement that read, "Now that justice has been served and the killers of Thomas Valva have been sentenced to lengthy prison sentences, the Suffolk Legislature will move forward with its investigation into the failures of the county's CPS system and begin to do all we can to ensure that every child is protected from neglect and abuse." Angela's 3 daughters are with their biological fathers, who have vowed to protect them, including preventing them from seeing their mother in prison. Thomas's surviving brothers now live with their mom, Justina. Anthony will be turning 14 in July. Andrew just turned 10 in May. Both boys look very happy and healthy based on the pictures their mom has posted of them. I wish all the best to those families, and especially those kids, and I hope they're getting the help they need to overcome the inevitable trauma from everything they've witnessed. My sources for the new content in this episode were News 12 The Bronx, News 12 Long Island, The Daily News, Facebook, Fox 5 New York, Oxygen, Patch, and the New York State Department of Corrections and Community Supervision website. That's it for this week. Join me next week for another episode. If you like the show, please follow or subscribe to Suffer the Little Children on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, Spreaker, Pandora, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, or your favorite podcast listening app. And please leave me a 5-star rating and a positive review on your favorite podcast platform. Visit the website at sufferthelittlechildrenpod.com. You can support the show by visiting patreon.com/stlcpod, where you can become a patron for rewards ranging from a shout-out by name on the show to bonus content and exclusive gifts. You can also support the show at ko-fi.com/stlcpod. Follow the podcast on Facebook and Instagram at Suffer the Little Children Pod and on TikTok at STLCpod. View photos related to today's episode on Facebook. For more stories like the one you heard today, visit sufferthelittlechildrenblog.com. This podcast is researched, written, hosted, edited, and produced by Lane. Intro theme music is by Dream Note Music, and all music for the show is licensed from audiojungle.net. For more information about preventing or reporting child abuse, visit childhelp.org or call your area's child abuse hotline. And remember, if you see something, say something.